Hey everyone, you're listening to the official podcast of 4playernetwork.com. Check us out at that address for everything you need to know about our community, monthly giveaways, and nightly live streams. You can even support us on Patreon at patreon.com/4player. And last but not least, you can catch the live recordings of these podcasts every single Thursday night on our Twitch channel. We hope to see you there. Enjoy.
Let's go.
My God, everybody, welcome to the show. Welcome to 4Player Podcast, guys. This is our long-awaited, I guess it's long-awaited. We've been kind of looking forward to it. Our Spoilercast for The Last of Us Part 2. At this point, this game's been out how long? We're at like week 5 or 6 or something. So it's been out for a while. We've all finished the game, and we're finally ready to talk about it in depth. So my name is Nick Henderson. I'll be your host this evening. I am joined by Brad Simons.
Hello.
Christopher Guthridge.
Hello.
Nolan Hedstrom.
How's it going, everybody?
And Christopher Davis.
Hello, hello.
And this is a big game. There's like I said, it's a big game. We have a lot to cover tonight. I honestly don't even know where the best place to start is. But let me preface this whole conversation with one. If you haven't finished the game and you don't want to be spoiled, turn it off now, because we are about to go as deep as we possibly can into The Last of Us Part 2. We will hold nothing back. Everything is fair game. Even the footage that you'll be watching while we talk about it is probably filled with spoilers, I would assume. I haven't watched Nolan's footage yet, but he's nodding yes. So we have a lot to talk about, and we're just going to jump right into it. And because I don't really know the best place to start, I think just a general question is maybe where we should start off, which is, I want to talk first about the first game a little bit, because everybody talks about how that game ended and how it was kind of like this.
For this podcast?
I mean, hey, Brad, you had your chance to tell me where to start.
Kidding.
This is where I'm starting, bitch.
No, it's very important to start with the first game, I think, because I think the
Right.
story of this game is so linked.
Intrinsically tied to that first game.
Yeah.
Specifically the ending. And everyone talks about the ending of the first game being so kind of beautiful and poetic and sad at the same time, and just kind of like this perfect way to end it. And we'll kind of go into detail about that in a few minutes, I guess. But Naughty Dog could have gone in any number of directions by making a sequel to this game, but they went with this. So I want to talk about why we think they went this way, and how that ending to the first game led them here.
Went this way in what respect? Are you specifically more referring to like the plot and the characters you play as, that sort of thing?
Okay, so the first game, very specifically, this whole second game, and kind of what I wasn't really expecting, because a lot of the marketing material and the footage that we saw leading into this, they did a pretty good job, I think, of kind of avoiding
I think
grander.
I wouldn't say I would say I think their footage purposely made you think the game was one thing when it was not that thing at all.
Right. And what they did kind of make clear, at least when they finally started showing footage of like Ellie and talking about what she's going through in the game, it seemed very obvious that, okay, she's very mad. Someone very close to her has died, and she's very angry.
The first speculation anyone's ever had for The Last of Us 2 after the very first teaser was Ghost Joel. Ghost Joel. Ghost Joel.
Yeah. And you know, we didn't get Ghost Joel, but we did obviously get Joel.
It's
dead dies.
That we were not allowed to make jokes about Ghost Joel on Twitter because it was so wrapped into an actual significant spoiler. It killed all Ghost Joel jokes.
It did.
That was unfortunate.
It did. But specifically, I want to talk about the ending of the first game first, because the whole conversation about that game was, especially when they first announced that, yes, we were in fact getting a sequel to this game, was, oh my God, kind of why? Like, that first game is so perfectly. This game doesn't need to exist. And they were obviously very aware of those conversations, but they were like, we're going to push forward and do it anyways. And they could have gone any direction they wanted, but they ended up going with this direction, which is Joel dying at the beginning and Ellie seeking revenge for the death of Joel. And I think that laying that card on the table, I think that's the kind of the simplest way to look at it, because it's a very simple premise, but you can go deep into it. which is what I want to do tonight. But how did y'all feel when we started to realize that, you know, uh, we were getting a sequel, and a lot of us were hesitant as to whether or not this was necessary, but just
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I feel like it gets a bad rap when people say, "Oh, that's us." They shouldn't do a sequel to this. Like,
mhm.
it's a very like controversial statement, I think. But I think the reason people said it so much about that first game is because it did end really well, like a beautiful ending. It was a well told story that was complete in an industry where a lot of games have really bad endings because they're so concerned
Or
about
bad stories in general.
franchises
They want a
and
sequel bait.
yeah, and this didn't
They want to
have
they
that,
want to
and it's,
leave
like,
they
Naughty
want to
Dog
leave you
did.
on that cliffhanger
Yeah,
where it's like, oh, what's going to happen next? Whereas this, while obviously there was room for the story to continue, like
yeah.
Brad said, it was very succinct and it was very, hey, this
It's
is
poignant.
the edge of the book. It is done. You can leave it here and everything would be fine.
It was the open-endedness that made it beautiful, I think.
Right. No, you're right.
Mhm.
And to be honest, so obviously, just my reaction to it's funny because when this game came out and people started talking about it, and I finished the game and started digging into these conversations. Um, One thing I kept seeing coming up was a lot of people talking about the end of the first game and how people were seeing it in a totally different light than I was.
Yeah,
Um,
which
and
is
I think that's
cool.
what makes it interesting, first of all. But that first game specifically ends with Joel takes Ellie all the way across the country to the Fireflies because she's immune to the fungal infection, thinking that they're going to use her to find a cure. That's true, but he finds out at the last second that the only way to do that is to perform this surgery because it's tied to her brain that would kill her. So at the last moment, he decides he's not going to let them kill her. He fucking murders everybody in this hospital, takes her while she's knocked out, and then he tells her later that it was a bust. You know, they weren't going to be able to find a cure with her, and sorry, we're going home. That's
More
it.
specifically, but she demanded that he
Yeah,
tell her what
and
happened,
and
which
that's what I'm
happened.
getting to. She demands that he swear to her that what he told her is true. And the last shot of that game is him saying, "I swear," and she just says, "Okay," and then it cuts to black, and that's the end of the game. And
It's so
I
weird.
it
The way you talk about it makes it seem so significant, which it is, and that does come up again in the sequel. But I feel like the actual fallout of that didn't really tie too much into what's happening. I mean, it could be seen that way, but I think when you
I think
start
it definitely did.
to like
well,
tie that to like Ellie's motivations and stuff for what she did, I feel like some of the
so
things.
the
I
fallout
think
specifically
I
of the
think that
lie.
the last scene of the first game plays a big part in this game. Not at the beginning of this game. You see it in flashbacks later on.
Yeah.
The relationship
No, like
between
I said,
Joel and
it's
Ellie.
very present in this game, but in my
It
mind,
doesn't
I
matter
start
to it
tying
doesn't
it
matter
to
on the actual scale of
Ellie's
like
motivation.
trying to find the cure. Like nobody who meets Ellie like from the Fireflies is like cares about the fact that she was immune, and that's not their motivation to like. It's like
Well,
the
the
biggest
Fireflies are gone.
the biggest fallout of that decision and that lie at the end of the first game really is Joel and Ellie's relationship when she eventually discovers that he lied to her, and she feels like her life or her life doesn't have much purpose anymore. Like she thought that was going to be her purpose in life, and it's kind of been taken away from her. So obviously she feels very angry at Joel
Yeah. Yeah,
for
but
falling out and so on and so forth.
what I mean when I say tied to Ellie's motivations is at you feel like with the way that ended and the way this one starts, and then as you start getting these flashbacks, that may be like one of the driving forces behind the decisions Ellie's making is she feels like she never like made up with Joel.
Right.
But then you
Well,
find out much later that she kind of did or was getting there, or she got over a
She
major
was getting
hump.
there.
She got over a
Well,
major
Yes.
hump to the point where it makes me wonder, like, you can't. I mean,
the
You know
night
what'd be nice is if we had footage of this game.
the day that Joel was killed was like she was supposed to have a movie night with him, and that was
Right.
like kind of like
Correct.
a big step in them reconciling. Like
yeah,
Yeah.
like she definitely was seeking some sort of closure and some sort of reconciliation with Joel, but but him getting murdered by Abby is what robbed her of that. So like that like
Yeah.
it's not even so much like revenge for what you've taken from me from the past, but like revenge from like this like you took away my chance to reconcile with my only family, you know?
Right.
not even just that he's dead, but like now he's dead and he died while we hated each other.
But
Right.
the tension of how the first game ended was sort of the hump that maybe was already gotten over. I could see that tension being more of a driving force than, you know, me and Joel were about to start, you know, reconciling it versus we never got a chance to even,
I mean, to be honest, and this is, I think, where a lot of people,
like, if they weren't talking to each other at all or something.
yeah, I mean,
Well,
it's
I don't
driven
think
by-
they really were.
for a while.
No,
Yeah,
I
they
know,
weren't.
I know. Never mind. Maybe I'm not. I'm just not.
Well, so
I mean,
hold on. If I just kind of, since we're talking about this, if I understand like the timeline of everything, she found out that he had lied to her.
Mhm.
X amount of time goes by, a couple of weeks, months, whatever. I don't think they were talking that entire time, and it literally wasn't until the night before he died that they had that first kind of conversation. And the only reason they had that conversation was because he kind of overstepped his bounds,
Mhm.
you know, interrupting that kind of fight that was going on and saying, hey, you know, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, you know, I don't need you to protect me. And that's kind of
Yeah.
or maybe was the driving force of her approaching him and
Yeah.
being like, hey, you know, I still don't forgive you, but I'm
Right.
willing to maybe start to try to.
and
And then the next day he fucking dies.
and
Well, yeah.
so I'm probably going to say this a few times tonight, so I apologize. I spent a lot of time listening to, like, you know, podcasts, interviews, whatever. A lot of conversations I saw, specifically with Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson, talking about their insight into the characters and all this stuff, and they spent a lot of time talking about the scene on the porch, which is where they start the kind of reconciliation process kind of begins.
Happens
And
at the end of the game, but
yeah, which you don't really see until very, very
Yeah.
late in the game.
although at the very beginning of the game, you do know that movie nights was
Yes,
gonna be a
she
thing, right?
slides that
You just
into,
didn't
like,
understand
casual
what the
conversation.
significance of that was
Mhm.
because you didn't know how on the ropes their relationship was.
Yeah, I
And
guess
and I think a lot of people are probably kind of on the fence as to whether, because a lot of people are like, I didn't like the way this game. We'll talk about structure tonight because, you know, there's a big conversation to be had there, I think.
Yeah.
But I ended up kind of liking the way that this was fed to me. So, like, as the game went on and on and on, I started to see how close they were to. It wasn't just like, hey, they had a falling out, they never had a chance to reconcile, and then he died. It was they had a falling out, and then they started to reconcile, and they were this close, and then it was
Yeah.
robbed of her.
They're both
And
like driving forces, right? I
Right.
just feel like one is like more. I mean, her actions are pretty deplorable in this game, right? And you kind of have to buy into that.
Yes.
I mean that's the whole topic, right? And I feel
Yeah.
like it has to come from like this bitter, like hateful player. It has to come from some place, right?
No,
From
it's definitely a bitter and
Yeah,
hateful place.
maybe
It's like
like-
it's like you had said, like she was robbed of her ability to rekindle or maybe repair the relationship with, like Chris Davis said, or her only family. She
Have
was
you said
robbed
that
of that, and now
Joel
she
gets
wants
killed?
to, you
Because
know,
this might
take
be-
revenge.
I
This
mean,
might be
what's up, Brad?
confusing if someone doesn't know that.
the game also puts a lot of emphasis on the personal stakes of like exactly what Ellie is willing to put herself through and like what she's willing to give up and how she's willing to compromise her life to do this thing, to draw the parallel that like her quest for revenge is not purely driven by hate for Abby. It's driven by hate for herself and like
Yeah.
things that she's done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you don't even see that until you start getting like halfway through the game. Like at first it's just like her dad was killed and now she's going to go kill the person that killed her dad, but then you start peeling back that trauma and you start seeing like, well, that's because, you know, the only reason, if she really cared about herself and she really was like at peace with where her life was before this happened, she could have walked away. She should have
Sure.
walked away several times, but like she doesn't because she wasn't at peace with like this thing was just one overt disaster in a line of like a lot of regretful decisions,
Right.
you know?
And it's
Agreed.
that horrible feeling of knowing she'll never find the closure that she wants. And, you know, at some point,
I think it's about finding closure, and her at first
well,
thinking
trying to find
closure
closure,
is,
even though it's
I
not
know.
gonna be- it's not really
I think
possible.
her thinking killing Abby will be that closure, and as time goes on, she kind of maybe starts to realize maybe that's not the closure she needs.
right.
I think at some
Um,
point, I think there's a lot of conversations about what the fuck is going on in Ellie's head when she's doing all the things she's doing, but I think it's probably not. There is no real like clear answer for why she's doing the things she's doing, like especially
She's
at the end of the game.
No,
right?
I mean it really
Well, I
comes
think
down to she's a human being who makes irrational decisions based on emotion, like a lot of like everybody does at some point in their life, and this is just like that concept taken to the
And
extreme.
to be fair, the plot, like her quest, the plot line that she's following, takes her into a city, like takes her into an environment that, irrespective of her and Abby, is already like a horrible, violent place.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
And
Yeah.
she is like she's not bringing this violence with her necessarily. She's being thrown into it and adapting to it. And she's basically submerging herself in other people's violence to reach the violence that she wants to get to, right?
right.
So it's like, how much of that shit are you going to wade through just to get to the one person you want, you know? So
Right.
like I feel like that's something that's kind of like often lost in the conversation about the violence of this game and about Ellie's motivations and her actions and her morality, is not that like everything was like, it wasn't like everything was fine before Ellie showed up, you know? She's not the force of terror and destruction. She's just somebody who's willing to jump into that for her own ends, you know?
Yeah.
And I
Sure.
don't know. I don't know if
Yeah,
that
I mean
just
you're absolutely
means
right because
anything
she's
to
jumping
you
into
guys,
first
but-
of all she's jumping into a huge city that is
but
Seattle,
I think
which is
I think like yeah, I think keeping in mind the situation between the WLF and the Seraphites in Seattle, and like Seattle itself just being like this character of just violence and horrible
Hostility.
things, right? And so much of it has nothing to do with Abby or with Ellie, you know?
right.
So
Um,
like yeah. I don't
Well,
know.
I think, like, Crispy, to that point, I think that's kind of one of the things that maybe some people were upset about with this game is that statement. It has nothing to do with Abby or Ellie. You know, these are just people who exist in a world
Well,
where
yeah, I
everyone
mean, I'm
else
not
has their own shit going on. You know, there are other characters. There's Dina. You know, she has had a past. She's had relationships with people. People have died. There's like Manny, you know, one of Abby's friends. He's, you know what I'm saying? Like everyone has their own thing. And that's where you kind of start to get to the point of, depending on your view, Joel and Ellie are bad people. You know, in the eyes of Abby, Joel is a bad guy. Always has been. Joel is not a good guy. When you play The Last of Us, you think he's a good guy because you're controlling him, and you want him to be the good guy, and you root for him to be the good guy. But he murders an innocent man, and now that the daughter of that innocent man views that as the villain in her. I know, innocent.
and I think
The villain in her story. And so yes, I think that's that conversation of, you know, the whole whatever that, I don't remember what show it's from, but he's like, are we the baddies? Like they've been doing bad things, they've wronged people, and it is, you know, it is within her moral compass, Abby's, as a person, to try and seek revenge for the death of her father.
And I mean, honestly, I think a lot of people. This is a very divisive game, and maybe rightfully so. I think a lot of the conversation kind of skips right past this idea that they don't like seeing someone a character that you care about so much painted in such a negative light. Maybe I don't think everybody. I don't think everybody felt that way.
We're having here.
No. I'm just saying. I feel like that's.
Nick is saying some people have.
I think a
have
lot
said
of
that.
people. I think a lot of people. There's a reason why, after this game came out, like I focused my conversation, my attention, 100% inside of our own community, and even then, I was kind of like hesitant because it was very volatile out there about this game, and I think a lot of it centers around a couple things. One, people not necessarily willing to accept a character that they love being painted in such a negative light, and two, we talked about the ending of the first game being so poignant and beautiful, and that's true. But it also, like, I remember when I saw the ending of that game, and I know what Joel did, and in my heart, I would have been like, I feel like I probably would have done the same thing. But I also remember thinking he lied to her. But I'm glad he did, because she's alive, and that is all that matters, and that means
That means Nick is gone.
Yeah.
Well,
to
carry on the conversation, Chris Davis.
Well, no. What I was going to say, kind of in relation to what Nick was saying, was, and it kind of, Crispy had mentioned earlier in quotes about being like innocent or whatever, that, and we kind of, I think we might have briefly touched on it in the last time we actually talked a podcast about The Last of Us, that everyone at the end of the first game was kind of in the wrong. besides Ellie, because she was unconscious and didn't have a choice. The Fireflies were in the wrong because they decided, hey, we're not going to ask Ellie if it's okay if we cut open her head. Joel was in the wrong because he just said, hey, Ellie, I'm not going to let them cut open your head. Everyone's opinion was asked except for the person whose opinion mattered.
Right.
Does that make
And-
sense? And so that's what I was saying. Then that's, I understand Chris be like innocent. The guy at the end of the game wasn't necessarily 100% innocent because he was kind of wrong to an extent.
I will say the guard who
I'm
was
just saying
walking.
that right there is that's the whole discussion. So like,
Sure.
to say one side was right or wrong.
I know.
The guard walking Joel out, who was being like a big dick for no reason, he was definitely the most in the wrong.
Yes,
Right.
I agree with that.
And that was actually a lot of the conversations I had talked about that one guard. And I also thought it was really interesting because it drew the parallels to the very beginning of the first game when that guard just violently killed his daughter, essentially, in front of him for no reason.
Mhm.
And like that moment at the very end when that guard was like shoving him and being a dick was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back.
Well,
and I thought that was really nice.
To be fair, the soldier at the beginning of Last of Us 1, I mean, think about the context of the situation there.
He did. I mean, he tried to he talked into his walkie and was like, "Hey, are you sure?" And then they said yes, and then he just went right along doing it. But you're splitting
Yeah,
hairs.
we're getting
Like
the
the point
weeds
is,
here.
he had an association with people following orders, militant people following orders, willing to kill innocent young girls for no reason, or not no reason, but for reasons they think are just. And that for him, that was too similar, it pushed him over the line. But I got cut off a minute ago, and I didn't quite get my thought out. What I was trying to say was that first ending of that first game was so poignant that a lot of people, I don't think, were ready or willing to kind of explore the consequences of what that ending implies, like what that lie meant. Because I think it was really easy to be like, oh yeah, he lied to her. They're both better off. Great. But like that lie, this whole game, everything that happens in this game kind of comes from that one lie. And
I don't know though. That's the thing. I feel like the event. Maybe this goes back to what Crispy was saying. Is once she gets into Seattle, like the environment, maybe she just becomes more of
just
like
going with the flow,
a physical force that just keeps moving forward or whatever, and adapts to the.
I mean, her motivation's definitely singular.
Yeah, she has tunnel vision. She's going for Abby, and anybody who gets in her way, it gets taken down.
Well, what I'm
because
saying,
that is her
the
goal.
lie had nothing to do with
No,
Joel
what I'm saying
killing
is
doctors, and had nothing to do with
Abby.
the revenge that Abby and her people wanted to exact on Joel. And I have a feeling that if Joel died the way she did in front of Ellie, the way she saw that, I think the events of this story would have taken place.
I think
probably similar to the way it did, regardless of where Joel and Ellie were in that relationship.
I think what Nick is trying to say more is that that's like the impetus of Ellie's story. I mean, Last of Us 2 isn't just about Ellie's story, right?
Right.
The first half of the game is, but and I do kind of agree with that. Like that, like you're right. I think that if she had been made to witness Joel's death and their relationship had been completely different, yeah, I think she still would have been angry. But the point is, we don't know. Like, we don't know what it would have been like because we don't know what kind of life they would have had because we are walking in on the situation 4 years after this one specific story beat, right?
right.
So I mean, like, I don't think it is completely outside the realm of possibility to presume that if Joel had had a little bit more trust in her and had been a little bit more honest than her, she might not have even been part of his life anymore,
Right.
So none of this would have even mattered.
And to be honest, maybe I focused too heavily on.
So I do think narratively, I think psychologically, I don't know. I'm not a psychologist, but I think narratively, Nick is right as far as that one moment being the kernel of Ellie's arc in Last of Us 2.
And maybe I focused too heavily on the lie, and maybe it was more of the decision that Joel made at the end. Because the lie, she probably would have been pissed one way or the other. But
just like all of drama, scenes represent larger ideas and larger themes and motifs that are going on.
Everybody,
and that
I think,
scene was the moment of truth.
As fucked up as that ending is in terms of what occurs, I feel like a lot of people came out the other side of that game feeling very satisfied because they were like, yes, Joel saved her life. that's all that matters to me. Hell yes. And he had to lie to her. He had to do the stuff. So be it. People were like, I feel good about this ending. I think it's perfect. I don't think a lot of people were ready to explore it beyond that. I don't think a lot of people were ready to be like, okay, that's great and all, but what he did is going to have some serious consequences.
Well, no,
and that's
what
this
I
game
disagree
tries
with
to
is
do.
that those were conversations people were having after The Last of Us 1, regardless of another video game explaining it to them.
Right.
Like, I don't think people were happy and satisfied with the where things are. I think they were at a point where, okay, let's discuss. And that was happening at the end of Last of Us 1.
Right.
Now
and
we have
this does give a definitive answer, and it kind of nullifies some of the discussion, the wonder that came from the end of that first game. I will say that when we get to talking about the ending of this game in a while, like, I think this game kind of ends in not an exact same place, but there's still plenty of room for discussion following this game. But then again, they're probably going to make a sequel to this at some point, and then it'll just
Will they?
the cycle will continue. I mean, I don't know. It's like one of the best-selling games ever made. Yeah, probably.
They could,
I would
but
also note
let me
that
ask
this
you
game's all.
Does this game have to be? Did this game have to be the story of Joel and Ellie to have been like a big success the way it was? Because my belief was never that you couldn't make another Last of Us game. It's just that
Maybe
story was over. Tell another story. If these were all complete, I trust Naughty Dog to create a story and characters that I really care about. I mean, they did half of this game.
To that regard, yeah, that's what I was gonna say, Brad. To that regard, I think if you would have taken all of Ellie and Joel out of this, and it had been a conversation or a story of the WLF versus the Seraphites and kind of all of that stuff, just a completely out of place thing in the same universe.
If this was a game
could
about
have
Yara
still
and
been
Lev,
as good.
it could have been fascinating too.
Mhm.
And that's not to say, I think it's a tough nut to crack, because people love characters. They latch onto characters, and even if you think a story is perfect, I think part of everybody is like, but I love these characters. I would love to see more of them, even if maybe it's not in the best interest of the story or the characters.
We're currently comparing this game as it exists to games that do not exist. So
you're right, and you're right.
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like
get out of that.
Okay, well, let's find.
That doesn't mean our hearts don't want to wonder.
Let's explore other possibilities here. Let's talk about specifically, maybe the first divisive moment of this game. One of the biggest moments of this game is Joel's death and the introduction of Abby. There's a lot of discussion happening about how they handled it. I'm wondering where y'all fall on this. It's kind of the inciting incident of
I think the way it was handled
in this game
was fine. Maybe the timing at which when Abby was first introduced versus when, I don't know. There's a lot of decisions that were made in regards to the structure, and because there's so many moving parts, it's hard for me to envision like a new rearrangement of them without really sitting down and trying to figure it all out. And that's not something I want to do. But
we kind of briefly touched on that when we first talked about this, trying to avoid spoilers about arrangements of the game. And I kind of talked about it with Bernadette as well. It's hard at first when I first played this, and like I said, I don't know if I said it before we went live, I kind of bounced back and forth with this game, liking it and not liking it and wishing things were different. And while I was playing it, a lot of the time my thought was, oh, if they had organized it in this way, if they had structured it in this order, I think it would have been better. But I don't know if that's the case. Like, and my assumption is, it's a video game. They could literally just rearrange the chapters however they wanted.
You have to imagine they tried different structures.
No, yeah, I'm sure this is where they ended in a good way, and maybe the way I'm trying to think of playing it maybe wouldn't actually have been good. Like at first I had said, oh, maybe if I didn't play as Abby early on, or maybe if I played as Abby earlier, it would have made a different impact. But I think I
kind of agree. I would have wanted to theoretically play as Abby through like the first entire half of the game, and then come back to Ellie in the second half.
That's what I thought at first, but the more I've thought about it, I think they didn't do it that way on purpose. I think they didn't want you to they wanted you to play as Abby while simultaneously not liking Abby. They wanted you to dislike her as you played her.
I also think from a game design perspective, it would have been a regression to do it that way, because Ellie's part is, I mean, sure, there's more open areas, but Ellie's part is very like story driven and character wise, like very singular. It's very like she's doing a thing in a place that's bigger than her, but she doesn't see much of that place. She is just going to the next place that she thinks Abby will be, or one of Abby's friends.
Right.
And that mirrors the first game a little more closely, where they're just trying to get through this next town, or they got to get through the university, because the whole game they're going to one destination and they're just on that line, right? And you play through that section, and it's a pretty standard Last of Us experience. And I think a lot of people's opinions of this game kind of reflect this fact that by the time you get to the second section with Abby, it's a different game. And like that's where a lot of people kind of dialed in, it was like, oh wow, this is weird and different. Because Abby's section is so much like story focused in a much larger scale than Ellie's.
I thought
Abby's
it was funny.
focus has to do with like these big political factions like fighting each other. She's seeing more of the city. She's seeing a larger framework of the world that we're in than what Ellie is seeing, just because of her perspective as a character,
Right.
And I think that is an opening up. I think to switch their two sections would be a closing off.
Yeah, I agree. A couple things here, because one, I listened to some developer commentary about this game, and a lot of the conversation was focused around like how they were going to do, specifically the beginning of the game, because they weren't sure when to introduce Abby or how to get you on board. Like, one thing I thought was interesting, and I didn't really think about it this way, and I don't think a lot of people think about it this way, but they went in very specifically knowing they wanted you to hate Abby.
That's what I just said.
I know, but they wanted you to hate her, and then they wanted to see if they could get you to not hate her. But like, they talked about a bunch of different ideas as to how they could achieve that, and how they could introduce the game and get you to that point where Abby kills Joel.
This was from the mouth of Naughty Dog.
Dude, what? Yeah.
No, I'm just asking. I missed the.
Yes, this is from develop. Like, this was
Those arrogant
Neil
fucks.
Druckmann, Haley Gross, and Troy Baker.
We're going
and
to
Ashley
create
Johnson.
this impossible challenge and show you how we can easily accomplish it, because we're not.
Brett,
and they fucking did. They did.
I mean,
so that's the thing, and I tried to add to your conversation, Nick, and I agree with you, and I thought that too, Brad. When I first played this, I told Bernadette, I think Abby's gonna kill Joel, and I think they're gonna try and get me to like Abby. And I don't think it's going to happen, but it did. I was surprised at how easily they accomplished their task.
There was a lot of conversations about how fast they could get to that, like how much backstory could you give Abby, without any insight as to what her motivations were. Get her to that point where she kills Joel, and
all they had to do was just make her Joel.
Like, there was talk about, like, before you even get to the point where you go to Seattle, there was talk about, like, when you're playing as Ellie, going to the carnival, going to the dance, and being the dance being playable, and like all this crazy shit, and like how they were, the game was going to open with you playing as a young Abby and all this stuff, and you were going to witness the death of your father firsthand, and then they were gonna eventually build up to this point where she kills Abby, and the whole idea was they got to get you to that point of hating her as quickly as possible so that they can then immediately start to unravel it. And I think by having her kill Joel and then playing as Ellie for the next however many hours of gameplay, where your sole focus is like, God, I fucking hate Abby. I thought it was brilliant that you spend 3 days playing as Ellie in Seattle. Her sole focus is to get to Abby and kill her. And then when you finally do play as Abby, you see that her entire 3-day experience, she's not even thinking about Ellie. Like, she doesn't know that Ellie's in town.
She doesn't know Ellie exists.
They don't cross paths at all, except for the theater.
Well, one of my favorite moments was when Abby knocks Tommy off the Tommy off the pier or whatever.
Yeah.
And she makes this look like, is that who I think it was? And that was like the first time that I feel like the two paths even kind of started to connect.
Oh, yeah.
And that's way far into Abby's story.
Yeah,
that's literally like towards
right
the
after
very
that,
end. Yeah.
And then right after that, you go to the island and you're like pulled way farther out.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I thought the fact that they managed to keep them so separate, but the entire time I'm playing as either character, all I'm doing is thinking about the other character and when are these stories going to fucking converge?
Which is where I get into some pacing complaints and
Sure,
frustration.
and there are
because this game's
certainly
so
pacing
long.
complaints to be had, but the structure, it's one of those situations because sometimes I was thinking like, should they have done like day 1 is Ellie, day 1 is Abby, day 2
once again, Nick, that's what I thought at first too. And while I was playing the game, I was like, I think they should have done this. And then by the time I finished the game, I was like, nah, well, they were right. God damn it, they were right.
But well, we're doing what Crispy had just pointed out earlier, that we keep talking about a game that doesn't exist. Let's talk about it as it does.
How decisions were made or what decision because there's a lot of talk about how the game is structured, and a lot of people talk about how I hate the way it's structured and be like, well, tell me a structure that you think works better. I have yet to see one that I think theoretically makes more sense.
Why this structure works is maybe a better conversation.
Okay.
And I think the reason why this structure works is because of that exact like horse blinder effect that you get from it,
Yeah.
It is like the first half of this game is very much a sequel to The Last of Us. The second half of this game is something different,
It's The Last of Us 3 with no connections.
Essentially. Like they just didn't want to wait for a third entry into the franchise. But like I feel like what is really interesting about both of these stories is that you're watching Ellie for 3 days process trauma by like just kind of not processing it.
Right.
And like she is just like bottling it up and it's just like rotting out her insides, right? And then you watch Abby go for 3 days processing trauma, and like her emotional journey is so completely different. Like it's a lot of her like questioning beliefs and a lot of her like facing direct fears, like even the fear of heights thing, which doesn't really have a whole lot to do with her conflict with Abby or like her trauma from her dad dying or anything like that.
I think
But
that
it's
just
still, like,
humanizes the character. It's
it
relatable.
does, but I think it also is kind of like tied in on a psychological level to like her fear of lack of control,
Yeah.
like look at what she's like, look at how she's like conditioned herself over the years, like she's this kind of person who's like turning a fear of in control and a fear of fate just coming by and like taking everything from her into like extreme preparedness, like
Yeah.
I am not going to be caught off guard again kind of thing.
And Abby's
her
also
fear of
had like
heights-
5 years to actually address that trauma.
it's true, but she didn't
Ellie's
until
only
now.
had like a few weeks.
you'll notice that even killing Joel didn't fix that trauma.
Killing Joel is like another huge source of trauma for her.
Yeah.
Like a whole big conversation in her arc of the game is like how other people think about her now because they saw her like that.
I mean, it's crazy because you look at you spend 3 days playing as Ellie and she's on this like you said, horse blinders, just like all she wants to do is kill Abby because she's convinced it'll make her feel better. And then you spend 3 days playing as Abby, who has literally done what Ellie is currently trying to do and trying to just come to terms with the fallout of that, and like doing these things that are so out of character for her because she desperately needs to like.
I mean, it's like you're watching this one character continually harm herself, and then you're watching this other character like kind of heal herself, like get to a place of like she arcs so much more, or rather she arcs a lot harder, more consistently throughout her story than Ellie does. Ellie is like flatline for a lot of it.
Are we going to talk about ludonarrative dissonance at all during the spoiler cast? I know this is mostly like a story focused thing, and you could talk about the story in a way. I mean, when you focus just on the story, then it's pretty easy to ignore just how different the characters seem in gameplay versus like cutscenes and stuff. And it's a big deal. I mean, the cycle of violence is one of the big themes of the game or whatever, right? And then gameplay, they try to introduce some stuff in that terms of gameplay, but the things you're actually doing in the gameplay is so at odds with where they want the characters to be in the story because
Well, I mean,
you know,
How do
like
you
like
mean?
oh,
I
like
feel
her,
like
her friends look at her differently because of the way she beat up Joel, but like at least there was baggage there. The 40 people she snuck out of the grass and just like stabbed in the neck.
Well, I think there's a difference there in that Joel, she spent years trying to seek revenge on him. It's not that, oh, she spent years not worrying about it, and then 40 years later, hey, by the way, there's this guy
she
Joel over
wasn't
here, he killed your
The
dad, and she's like, oh,
obsession
I'm
or
gonna go
whatever.
kill him.
she wasn't
She spent
defending
years
herself
trying
in
to
the
find it
moment.
out, to
I
the
think
point
I-
where it kind of ruined relationships that she already had because she was tunneled on Joel, versus like fighting with the Seraphites or whatever. That is like, if she didn't kill them, they would kill her kind of type deal, because they are constantly at war with each other. That's a little bit different. Like
It's
when
weird
she
though, the
met
way you
Joel,
play the game
he didn't try to
actually
kill her.
changes things.
That's what I'm saying. Like if hold on.
Okay.
If she would have walked up to Joel, he wouldn't have killed her, because in fact that happened. He saved her.
Yeah.
He was like, "Hey, you're a cool person. Let's save each other from these zombies." If I just walked into this room in the game and a Seraphite saw me, they're going to try and kill me.
right.
I think
Well,
that's the difference
That kind
between
of goes
like
back to what I was saying before, is that like this is all happening in an atmosphere of violence. Like these people
Yeah.
aren't bringing the violence into this. It is just there, and it would be
And-
there even if they weren't.
And
know?
Abby and Ellie specifically are two characters that were born into this world. Like neither of them know any existence where killing to survive is just not. It's part of life.
Right.
Like even you have a conversation with Dina at the very beginning when you're first entering Seattle, where Ellie asked her when was the first time you killed someone, and she said she was like 10.
Yeah.
And it's just something that they do because they're frequently forced into situations where they have to do it to survive. They don't think twice about killing people if someone's threatening them. It's about.
I know
it's
they
about,
only think twice when.
I mean,
Continue.
I know what you're going. I mean, I'm just saying, like, for me, I didn't really experience
think-
much ludonarrative because it all seemed.
I feel like ludonarrative dissonance was more significant with this game than a lot of other games, even though this game was trying to make a concerted effort to maybe close that gap with a lot of the
Fred.
things
I
they
don't-
introduced in terms of
I
Fred,
think it's the opposite.
Can you
Like, I
define
think-
ludonarrative dissonance?
like the difference between like the story Abby versus like gameplay Abby, or the Nathan Drake one. He's like the
I think
puckish
Uncharted
rogue
has
that
way
everyone
more
loves, but he
ludonarrative
murders.
dissonance than this.
No, but see,
the
I
term came
disagree.
about. The term came about during a critique of BioShock, specifically about the whole debate between like harvesting and saving little sisters, right?
Yeah.
So it's about like a fundamental narrative disconnect between the story that the game is presenting to you when it has a chance to just like exposit at you, and the story that you're able to create with your agency as a player. Right. So, and I get where you're coming from, Brad, but I don't even really think that's what's going on here. Like, I don't think that's what's going on here because I feel
what
like
part of it's not going on?
ludonarrative dissonance is more of an issue when you're talking about like how frivolous extreme violence gets. Like I think more what's happening is that like, I watched this video earlier today, so I can't get a lot of these ideas out of my head. But that Noah Caldwell Gervais, right, was talking about this, and he said that he was saying that the difference between the assumption of role on the player's part in this game and a lot of games is the difference between playing and play acting, right? Naughty Dog is expecting the players to kind of more play act these characters a little bit more than a typical game would expect from the player base. And part of that goes into the idea that most games with like a combat element make that combat more fun, quote unquote, for players by kind of making it evaporative, by making it like more
Inconsequential.
Right? And
Yeah.
it's just like more hordes and hordes, like killing things in Doom is inconsequential because it's just like a bunch of fucking demons and who cares, right? Like there's nothing going on there to put a barrier between the players' acts of violence and the fun that they're experiencing, right? So this is trying to remove some of that ludonarrative dissonance by inserting more of a context for the violence. Do you know what I'm saying?
And also, I would say that like you're calling out ludonarrative dissonance, but it's all based on how you choose to play the game. Like,
you got a
certain
fucking point, but that sort of gets at the heart of ludonarrative dissonance because I think
I just
we all play the game very differently, which means the game versions of your game version of Ellie is very different than mine, and I think yours is more honest.
Okay,
Well,
so
I mean,
so
whatever.
a question, the question to follow up on that, Brad. How are you two questions. Part one, are you referring to narrative dissonance on Ellie's part or on Abby's part? And two, how would you have the the story that is out of your hands structured differently that it would make more sense? Because in
Well,
my
I mean,
opinion, I don't see this ludonarrative dissonance. I see both of them killing people as something 100% those characters would do. I don't see that as out of scope at all for
killing
them.
who? All like the dozens and dozens of people you kill?
Anybody who
mean,
gets in your
Ellie is
way,
killing
yeah.
anyone who's in her way because she has tunnel vision to get to Abby. Anyone who stops her, she's going to kill. Abby, as you notice, isn't killing random people. She is killing people who are, her faction, which is a bad faction. We can get into whatever about the WLF we want to. They are bad people overall, but she is killing all of these Seraphites because they are at war.
You're right.
She
with
is a
WLF.
soldier
No,
at
the thing is,
war.
I agree with you. They're all
Yeah.
bad people. They're people in their way, so they're killing them. But what but the problem is the only deaths and stuff that actually seem to affect these fucking characters are these significant story
But
ones.
again,
like
I think
the
that
impact to that these the effect that the violence has on these characters only really like plays into like what's happening in cutscenes.
okay.
You
First
know,
of all,
That's debatable. Sorry, go ahead.
I think there's one the reason the major deaths are driven home as more important, quote unquote, so to speak, is because they're emotionally tied to the characters.
exactly.
They're personal.
I think there's only 2 deaths that are like that. Go ahead.
I
Matt.
mean,
But
you
what
could
I'm saying,
argue
it
that
feels like
Ellie
such
kills
it feels like such a cliche because it happens in so many things, and it happens here where a character can kill 500 people, 200 people, and then get to the one that really matters, and then they just can't do it. That
But,
happens
that's not
like in
what's
every
happening
fucking
here.
movie. No, that does happen.
I know
I
that
don't
happens
think that's
here.
what happens here. Dude, this whole game is about literally like the deplorable shit she does that you mentioned several times already. It sounds like you were referring mainly to things that are done in cutscenes where she kills Nora, where she kills Mel, and all these
I mean,
things that are
to
horrible.
be clear,
But,
the stuff she's doing in gameplay is fucking
that's the
deplorable
deplorable
and
shit,
horrible
and
as well.
it is all about.
Maybe worse.
I mean, like Crispy said, and I think this again. I want to post a link to that video in the show notes because it's a fascinating discussion. But like, he makes a really good point. Like, when you kill all these people, it's not like you are play act. Like he uses the word play acting, and I think you are doing what Ellie is being justified as the story is justifying. This is what Ellie is doing. She is on a revenge. She is on a murder spree, going through anyone who's going to get between her and Abby. That's all she cares about. So any person that I came across that I killed in this game, it didn't feel out of place. It just felt like something I needed to do to accomplish the objective, because that is the character that is being written for this game. She is on a mission, and these people are standing in the way of me accomplishing that mission.
What about the way that Chris Davis played?
I don't really know how Chris Davis played.
He killed 8 people in this game, I think.
He had mentioned that he didn't kill a lot of people, but in my opinion, that is irrelevant to the story. That is almost as if you had removed all those 500 people between you and Abby, and you just never came across them. Because in my opinion, she still would have killed them. And to Brad's point, you had mentioned, the killing of these people, and Nick had mentioned the deplorable killing of Nora. I don't think Ellie cared about any single person she killed until Mel, and the only reason she cared about that was because Mel is pregnant, and that's because Dina, the girl she kind of is in love with, is pregnant, and that just kind of was too close to home. What, Crispy?
The first night she kills the doctor girl, and then has like a fucking her like first PTSD like breakdown after.
Yeah.
Remember, she goes back and she's like, I made her talk.
That scene.
Which to
Like
be
Dina's
clear,
like, what happened? She's like, I made her talk, and then she just like has a fucking breakdown. Like that happens a lot in this game. She's like, just when she's alone with her thoughts in the theaters, it's just her having like fucking meltdowns. And so like I think to say that like only 2 people's death mattered to her in this game is like a real misread of what's happening. Like,
what you just said about when she's alone with her thoughts in the theater, I think is really important, because when she's going through the levels of this game, when you're playing the levels in this game and you're mowing down all these people, it's almost like she's a train that can't be stopped, she's not even giving herself time to think about what she's doing because she's so singularly focused. When she finally has a moment to like reflect on what she's doing, usually it does happen after she kills a major character. But
There's
I
a
don't
lot of
think
reflecting
I
when
don't
you're
think the
scrounging
PS
around
Yeah.
for 10 hours of this game.
Like
But I
like
don't think the
any
PTSD
place
she's
of
having-
safety in this game for Ellie is a place for her to reflect. I mean, later on in the game when you get to the farm, like she has that PTSD episode.
and we'll talk about that because I think that's a major
look,
point that I want to get
to wrap up this whole ludonarrative dissonance thing. Look, I don't know what the correct read on this or is or not, but the reason I think it is like an interesting conversation with this game specifically, the reason I think it's more of a conversation that should be had with this game versus something like Uncharted is because Uncharted doesn't actually give a shit. The story is not concerned about the effects that the violence has on a character. This game does, right? Like that's the heart of this story. So that's why I think this conversation is more relevant to this game than some other video game.
I'm just saying, if you think the PTSD that she's experiencing, the reflection that she's having, isn't also as a result of all the people that she's mowed down to get to this point, I think you're. I think you're.
No,
not
I
seeing
mean,
something.
look, I can see how that's a part of it, but you know, it's just the whole like, it's the ones, you know, it's like I can't kill her like 3 different times, both characters throughout the game. It's the one that should be the easiest to kill, but the one easiest to kill is the one you sneak out of the grass and like stab in the neck, and it's just so dissonant.
And we'll get to that. We'll get to because you're alluding to like what happens at the very, 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 very end, and I want to get there for sure. But before we do we need to take a break? Oh, wait, we're coming up in an hour. Do you want to take a break? Or you want to keep going?
Let's just keep going.
Okay.
I mean, because if we're split this, it's not going to be 2 hours long at the rate we're going.
All right.
I mean, I
So
wouldn't
we
mind
could
a
go.
break.
Oh, okay.
I'm trying to think.
No,
of
no
where,
one, shut up.
Well, let's do one more. Let's do one more. Like,
Well, let's do like a half hour and then a break.
well, let's just do one more topic here and just see where we want to go and take a
Brad
break.
just wants to end the podcast.
No, no.
after
The thing is, I feel like there's a lot of ground we haven't covered, and I think momentum is important here.
Well,
Can
then
we
y'all
talk
keep
about-
talking.
Can we talk about Joel specifically and how?
I thought we're
Naughty
done with
Dog-
Joel. He's dead.
No, that's what I want to talk about because Naughty Dog, they killed this major character off at the very beginning, yet they somehow managed to make him feel, in my opinion at least, they make him feel important, present, central to the story.
Luckily, he's not Ghost Joel. That's actually showing up in the quiet moments.
To be
have
honest, when those-
conversations with Ellie.
When
But
those
I
leaks
wouldn't-
happened, and I saw, so I think Crispy, you saw the leaks, right? When it happened.
I saw some of them.
Yeah, and I remember Crispy saying something where he was like, "I'm not going to tell you what I saw, but whoa!" And I was like, "Oh no, the Ghost Joel thing is real." Like that
Dude,
was my first.
I would have been fucking spitting blood if the Ghost Joel thing was real. That was
God.
the one thing that I was like swearing up and down about when they first announced this game.
I hated
Everyone
that
was
fucking
like, "Oh, it's
idea.
gonna be Ghost Joel," and I'm like, you people need to read some better books. Like, I
Look,
don't know what
dude,
else to say.
Look,
Like,
Naughty Dog is not.
I know.
Look, they're not above cliches. There's a
know.
lot of them in both Naughty Dog. I mean, in
I
both
know,
Last
but
of Us
like,
games.
but it was like bandied about as if it was such an inevitability of storytelling.
You know
but
what? When
from,
we
like,
saw
anyone.
that teaser, it might have been because that teaser read like that.
Mm,
Man,
I mean,
when-
Joel was not
think-
there in that
I think
scene,
if you
but he
choose to
talked
ignore
her.
nuance, sure it does.
Look, dude, that first scene with Joel in the doorway, he said something to her, and he was not
was also-
existing at that
He
point.
was also blurry, like blurred out, and like never in, like he was never in focus
He
in that
said
shot.
something to her.
No, he did.
That
he
is
said,
a
"Hey,
Ghost
kiddo."
Joel move.
I
I
know, I know.
never
He was dead.
subscribed
He
to
was
the Ghost
dead.
Joel theory. I never
Look,
did.
We're not here to talk about the Ghost Joel.
And the
theory.
I think we've
moment-
talked about this theory for way too much.
The moment they
still-
released that trailer that actually
Yeah,
showed him off for the first
A
time,
theory that we know isn't
I
real.
felt so relieved.
You know what's
so
funny? When they showed that,
relieved,
I
man.
still thought like maybe it's still Ghost Joel because like I still think he's dead.
Well, hold on.
Uh,
So just out of curiosity, because I didn't watch I only watched like one of the first couple of trailers and then I went immediate blackout. Isn't the one time I remember seeing him in a trailer, wasn't that actually not even him in the game?
No, it was Jesse. They
Yeah, it was
did the-
Jesse.
They swapped him out because they were trying to lead people away. Anyways, that's
That's
not what I
what
want
I
to have a
think.
conversation about. I want to have a talk about how they managed to keep Joel, because Joel, despite being dead very early on in the game, still plays a central part in like some incredible moments in this game and plays a very important role. One being the flashbacks. And this game, everybody
This
remembers
game
the
has
first.
some great fucking
The
flashbacks.
first game is so memorable for these moments, like the giraffes. Obviously, is a huge one. And I was worried the moment I knew Joel was dead. I was like, is this game gonna have those moments? And the fucking museum flashback in this game is
Fantastic.
so fucking good. Oh
I like
my
it.
god. You
I think
you
it's a
telling me
little
you didn't
overrated.
cry? You didn't cry playing the museum
Look, I
flashback?
think the spaceship scene. I mean, I feel like they were redoing a lot of like bits that they did in Left Behind.
Yeah, because
And I mean, and the stuff was good. It was well executed, but I feel like it was definitely trying to make you.
Boo, Brad. Boo,
Hey,
Brad.
I mean,
there's
look,
nothing wrong
that's
with
a
tugging
bad
on
opinion.
heartstrings, man.
There's nothing
No,
wrong.
boo, Brad. That is a bad.
I tell you
opinion.
what those moments do for this game more than anything is keep the game from being this like there would have been no
Yeah.
redeeming like happy moments in the game.
Yeah,
without
but I feel
those
like the game wanted to
flashbacks.
remind you of that relationship, but
Of
I
course
didn't.
they did.
I
Of
didn't need
course
a
they did.
reminding.
But like some people,
I
did.
don't. Hold on. I don't think they were
It was
trying to
long.
remind you of the relationship. I think they were trying to say, "Hey,
That is- yeah.
since the first game ended, and now like good times had happened. It's not like it had gone to shit the next day. They still went on some adventures together and things because we never got to see them in Jackson. We never got to see any of that. It just kind of skips from the end of the first game when they arrive to Jill
Yeah.
dying there.
The entire framing of their relationship in this game, except for those moments, is like one of grief or anger or alienation.
Yeah.
Well,
And that's like the one time where they can really just be like, "Yeah, remember the good times."
Maybe
And
as a singular game,
I'm sure
this
they
game sort of
didn't
needed
design
it.
it around the fact that Brad had just played The Last of Us before. Last of Us.
No,
2
yeah,
came
you're
out.
right. You're right. Like as a standalone story, like maybe this needed that, like for sure. And it's not even like it's not that I didn't like what was happening there. I mean, I really enjoyed those moments. Like the thing in the space shuttle was great.
Space capsule putting hats
Space
on
capsule
dinosaurs.
was great. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean was a little tweet, but I mean I still did it to every fucking dinosaur.
You can't say you didn't love Joel like constantly talking about Jurassic Park.
I
I just
He's like,
feel
no, those
this
are
game was trying
velociraptors.
so it was.
I saw it in a movie.
It felt it's so at odds with everything else in this game. It almost felt manipulative.
Of course, it was manipulative.
Almost.
Any kind of sappy, like sweet kind of thing. That's like think of Ellie telling Joel jokes in the first game. That's all that is trying to build up the character.
I like
What does
that.
fucking mean a story is manipulative? What
Well,
does that mean?
I mean,
It's a good
story-
point, Crispy. That's just
Stop
a story
trying to
being a
make me
story.
feel feeling story that I'm consuming on a purely rational level.
I mean,
What?
no. It was look. I like the stuff. This game is very long. That sequence went on for
It's
a
like-
very long time.
I
There
know.
are
I
scenes-
don't think it's a real
Listen.
argument either. I think you're just saying it.
No,
I don't think it means anything.
You're an asshole. I mean that. I think this game is very long, and I think you can accomplish a lot of what this game is trying to do with those flashbacks. There is literally two flashbacks. One where you play a really long sequence where you're fighting zombies and you get to a cutscene at the end, and then another one that's just the cutscene that would have been maybe at the end of a very long sequence that maybe they just didn't make the cutting room floor. And that second cutscene that didn't have a very long fucking gameplay sequence was just
Brad,
as
why are you
effective.
dancing around shit? Which cutscene are you talking about?
He's talking about the one-
the
when they go hunting for the
confrontation
guitar.
cutscenes where Ellie confronts Joel. There's two of them. There's one where he first where she first kind of
where they're in like the cabin or the hotel.
No,
or
the
there's
hotel.
one-
There's the hotel.
There's guys, hold on a second. There's the guitar strings flashback where
Mhm.
Joel, they go through that lodge trying to get across town to try and find the guitar strings.
That's what Brad was talking about.
No, well, that's separate because that one, the one that he's talking about, is where Ellie runs away and Joel goes after her and he finds her. He finds her at the hospital.
You don't do any fighting in that one, do you?
No,
No.
it's
No.
literally
Yeah,
she runs away. He knows.
Okay,
he
yeah, yeah.
realizes where she's going, and then he finds her at the Fireflies Hospital.
You know that the Qatar one was bullshit because I fought that fucking guy for so long, not realizing I was supposed to die to him.
Dude, wait, you were what?
Yeah, that's how that one ended. Like when the bloater guy gets you and then Joel saves you. Like you had to like lose to him. But I spent like 20 minutes fighting this dude, and I'm like, how come he's not dead yet?
They blend
Yeah.
that stuff so well. It's fucking hard. I mean, they're like
Yeah.
magicians with that shit. I don't know
Mhm.
what stuff is like gameplay and scripted versus well, whatever. That's
It's very true.
Anyway,
Naughty Dog's really good at making
What
video
I
games.
wanted to say
But-
last thing about that flashback with the mute. First of all, they could have cut any number of things out. You're right. The game is maybe unnecessarily long. I wouldn't have cut the museum scene.
No.
I think the
but
purpose
you spend a
is less
lot of
about-
time like outside that fucking museum.
I know. I mean, honestly, it's the museum sequence specifically. I think is placed where it's placed because not to remind you of how much you love Joel and Ellie's relationship, but to remind you at that point in the story, after you've done all of these terrible things, that she still feels justified doing what she's doing, and that's what she's holding on to. That's what's driving her at that point.
Well, Brett,
I mean,
I will agree with you and Nick that the game definitely felt bloated, and there are some sequences that should have been there, but just should have taken less time. And I
started
will
thinking
argue
about like what I would have removed, and I was like, I can't think. Of
I'm not
something I
saying
would've
remove
out-
anything. I'm not saying remove anything.
I think
Just-
right now what
just
we're watching is exactly
more
something
linear.
that should have been truncated or removed.
Well, yes.
What are we watching? I'm
From
not
point A to
looking at it.
point B could have
Oh,
just
yeah.
been a shorter distance. But like what I was talking about is when they have to go get medicine for Yara, and Lev's like, I know a shortcut. It's only 2 hours, and it literally takes fucking 2 hours of gameplay to get
But
there.
that
And that's
piece is so
exactly,
good.
but that's exactly how long Gideon took to put the League of Evil X's together, and that's a ridiculous amount of time.
I feel like
it
if,
should have
if
been
this
like
game
a
had
20-minute
factions,
segment.
I feel like if this game had factions, y'all would be more on my side. That a lot of these gameplay sequences should have been on the cutting room
But
floor.
here's the thing: I kept thinking about these
I-
moments that people
I'm
frequently
not
say.
not on
What?
your side. I definitely think that if there were cuts to be made, it would be in this rather than story content.
Wait, what? Sorry, what's on screen right now? I'm not looking at it.
Oh,
It's
no,
the beginning of Santa
Santa
Barbara
Barbara
for,
running around
for
Yeah, which is a
Ellie
conversation we'll have
specifically.
around 11, I'm guessing.
First, we weren't moving fast enough, Brad. Now we're moving too fast. Or first, we were moving too fast. Now we're not moving fast enough. Is that what you're saying?
No. I mean, I was always expecting this to be long.
I'm just.
That's what she said.
I'm just
Let's
saying.
let's say the pacing of our podcast is very uneven,
Why?
Sure.
Just
Yeah.
like The
unrelated
Last
to
of Us
anything we're
2.
talking about.
I'm just saying. I kept thinking about this because you're right. It took me about 33 hours to finish this game, which is about twice as long as I was expecting before reviews hit and people started finding out how big this game actually was. And I kept thinking to myself, like, okay, maybe it was a bit long. Where would I trim the fat? And I kept thinking about things, and I was like, no, I wouldn't remove that because I love that sequence.
Well, we just
And I
talked
love
about
that
an
sequence.
example, like the gameplay sequence leading up to that first cutscene, the one where you go through the hotel and the first cutscene where Ellie
love that
confronts Joel.
sequence.
I know it's all good fucking gameplay. That's the thing. But
So
you
don't
could
cut
have
it.
too much of a good thing. Maybe replace that cool moment with this shitty one that we're watching here to like cut time. Look,
It's
all
killing me,
good,
guys. I don't
but-
know what
but
we're looking at.
the Santa Barbara stuff. Look,
I love
it's because, and honestly, in my opinion, the reason I think that the gameplay feels over. I played a lot of fucking 30-hour games, and I don't always have these fucking complaints. But most 30 hours games have a lot more verbs than The Last of Us has, which is fighting things, which is looking for resources, which is watching cutscenes.
But here,
And it's 30 hours of that.
here's what I
and you know
don't
what?
get.
That means like 15 of them are spent scrounging for resources because you spend a lot of time between. You spend a lot more time between battles than I think you do in battles. And more battles means more of that other stuff. That's just not fun looking around.
Do you know why? I mean, like maybe so. I played this game in 4 days straight,
Okay.
and
Sicko.
I know. But I remember thinking to myself, like, you're right. Maybe there's not a ton of variation in
You know
what
what's
you're doing
refreshing?
in the
Rope
game.
puzzles.
Rope puzzles are refreshing, sure. Well,
God of
but
War is a game that you could play
what
for
this
40 hours,
game-
but there's like it's filled with all these interesting puzzles. And I think this game had that potential. And it was just skirting around the idea, but no. I mean,
But I
think
can't
about
tell
the
you, dude.
time you spent doing rope puzzles and the time you spent gathering resources.
I wish
I'll-
this game had more RPG elements too.
I
No,
can't
that's
tell
not what
you,
I'm
dude.
saying either,
Oh my
ass.
God.
I
Hold
don't
on,
know.
Nick,
I don't
hold
know.
on.
I'm just joking. I'm just being
Brad,
funny.
stop. Crispy, stop. What's your comment, Nick?
All I'm trying to like any other game that tried to do this be as narrative focused and as high production and like good acting and all, like any game that tried to do this that was 30 hours long would have done the bullshit thing that I see so often where they have you play as one character and they have you play as a second character that goes through the exact same like environments. And this game almost never repeats environments with maybe the exception of like the theater. And every one of these environments, every one of these places you go.
I mean, the aquarium.
How about this?
Oh,
it's all beautiful.
sure.
How about this? The game is still 30 hours long, but there's a lot more sequences like that open section you do in Seattle.
So
I'm not
I
complaining
think-
with that game. I think this whole game should have been more like that.
I think
I would agree.
What
I would agree with that.
would have made it better is, I know you're not watching the stream, but in the segment in Santa Barbara, when you start there as Ellie, you're in the sailboat and you go across the
Right.
beach and then you go down a street and then you go into a house and then you go down another street and into another house and down. And I think if you would have just cut out one of those streets and one of those houses, you would have had a great time in the Santa Barbara area and it wouldn't have taken away anything, but it would have
Right.
saved you 20 minutes of gameplay, maybe
They can trim
15.
the fat
And
without
if you
trimming
take
whole areas,
yeah, that's what I'm saying. If you just take a small segment out of each of these areas away, the game would have been 20 hours, 25 hours. And all of a sudden people, I don't think would have been like as like I said, that segment where you and Lev, while a great trek, have to go from wherever you started to the hospital, would have been great if it was an hour, not 2 hours. Like,
yeah,
if
I can't think of any other game.
I'm just taking like little chunks and removing them. Like, I don't know. That's my opinion.
No,
Yeah, I mean, remember,
not
for every
wrong,
combat
you're not wrong.
encounter you take, you also remove like twice as much time before and after looking for stuff, which is honestly never fun. I mean, the environment's nice to look at, but what you're doing isn't fun. It's kind of tedious.
I mean,
Like, by the goddess in chat
I
brings
find
up
it
the
fun,
whole
but hey.
the hotel thing when Lev and Abby are going and they fall and they have to go through that hotel. Oh my god, you spent so much time in that hotel,
but
like trying to like find your way out of there.
There's
and
cool
stuff.
moments there.
I
Yeah.
remember when
I'm not saying there's
first
not,
come in.
and I'm not saying the hotel shouldn't have been there.
I know.
It just
But-
shouldn't have taken you 40 minutes.
But that
Well, I
first
think-
moment, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, for a bit of perspective on that issue, I think one of the arguments for making the hotel a more prominent section than other sections of the game in Abby's section is because that was all about her like dealing with the whole heights thing.
No.
Remember?
That's what I'm saying, Crispy. Right as they fall, after the heights, they fall into that pool. It still takes you another 40 minutes to get out of
Because
the
they
hotel.
literally have you climb down
Because
you
you have to
you go into
descend
that
through
room.
the dilapidated hotel building.
But like that moment,
See,
when
you already
step out and
forgot
you see
about
the-
it, Crispy, because it's not even fucking memorable.
Yeah,
Unless
you're
you
right.
didn't like it.
You're right.
No, but
You're
like
right.
It's frustrating.
There are a lot of those encounters where it's like you do a whole ass encounter and you're like awesome, and then you're walking into a second encounter.
well, real quick,
And that stuff is a little like oof.
to Nolan's point, that sequence in the hotel, the thing they could have trimmed there would have been because when you first arrive, you only find one gas mask. So Lev needs a gas mask. So Abby has to venture into the hotel that one section by herself first to get a gas
find
mask
one.
and then go back. If you just found 2 gas masks at the beginning and cut that part out completely, that would have shaved like 20 minutes
I think
off.
you could have left it. You find a second gas mask, you go back and give it to Lev, and then y'all walk 20 feet and find a shaft that has a fucking ladder in it, and you climb down and you're at the bottom. There you go. It's still a great segment. You get left by yourself for a while because you were used to being with someone else. You were used to having someone have your back. But all of a sudden now you're by yourself and it's kind of scary again and you're not really sure and blah, blah, blah. But then, you do that segment by yourself, you find Lev a gas mask, then you're done.
All
I
I'm saying,
think the reason it bothers me so much, the stuff in between,
Mhm.
that really stretches out these sequences, and the more combat, the more of these things in between where you're gathering resources, is there's no
Mhm.
tension there. Well, I think one of the biggest, like, I guess, gameplay flaws in this game is the way that there is such a delineation between when you're in combat and when you're not in combat. And even though this is a horror game, a horror setting, and you
I
should
know
be
what you're saying.
terrified, you're never terrified when you're out of combat because you always know you're out of combat, with one exception in the game where you visit a workbench. And there's a reason why everyone talked about that setting is because your guard was down. But this game, outside of that, is not concerned. They just want you to know they're out of combat because they can write 80 quips saying, let's go find some shit or whatever. And they don't want the player to be confused, or I don't know why they do it.
You're right.
But it's frustrating. In a
100% agree
horror
with
game,
that.
you should never do that. and this does barely. I mean, if people don't think this is a horror game, I think that's one of the core problems with it.
Yeah, you're right. I 100% agree. The fact that they always say, I think that's the last of them or whatever.
Or
Whenever
yeah,
It's
yeah, I
it's like
got them all.
the
or
only
something, yeah.
time you were ever surprised while you're walking around your guards down is a scripted story sequence.
Are we-
It's never because you're afraid of something in the environment, like you would say, like, oh, a horror game or like a Souls game or whatever, right?
Wait,
So,
wait,
so here's my
there's-
question
I-
to
I have
that,
a
Brad.
thing. I have a thing.
Go ahead, Crispy.
Are we saying that this is a horror game and that this has to be a horror game?
I'm saying it
I don't
doesn't
think
feel
it
like a
is.
horror game, but it probably would have.
I don't
It
think it
probably
is.
What I'm
would.
saying is it a horror game? Like, I mean, whether like is that what they?
there are lots
I
of
don't
moments where they
think so.
clearly want you
I don't
to
think
feel
it
tense.
is. I think
Scary
it's like an
things,
I
action
think
dark
there
environments,
are-
limited resources.
I
mean,
think there are some sections that are, but my question to you, Brad, is okay. So let's say
it's not
it's
a
a
very
horror
tense
game.
game.
How do we do that? How do we take this area that I'm just in? I just killed a bunch of zombies, and now I'm kind of looting the area. Okay, so how do you make it to where you don't feel comfortable? You just have constantly spawning enemies.
No, the enemies
No,
don't
you just
spawn.
never
They just
make it
inhabit
clear-
the environment.
You never make it
So
clear to the
they
player.
did. They inhabited the environment. I killed them all, and now I'm relieved and I'm safe, and I go and I loot.
I
But
mean,
the
it's
point
just,
is,
it's just a
what
completely
Brad's saying is
different
you should never
design.
feel relieved and safe.
Yeah, and you.
Well, then,
and-
but then my question is, how do you do that besides
not
just
saying-
constantly spawning enemies?
I
No,
don't.
but by never announcing to the player that
Okay,
okay,
gotcha.
it's all safe
Yeah.
now.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say I don't know that I agree that with that assumption.
I mean,
okay.
I think it comes down to, is that even what they wanted?
Well,
Do they
I
want
mean-
people to think this is a horror game?
No, it's not the horror. Let's pretend I never said the word horror, and I just hate that the fucking all the tension goes out the fucking room because there's really creepy shit in this world, you know.
You're right.
So okay, so
You
and
make
I'm not,
it more
I'm,
like
I'm
Dark
not trying to
Souls.
play
I'm
devil's
gonna say it.
advocate,
Make it more
really.
like Dark Souls.
But my question
I
is,
knew
so
it.
what
More
happens
RPG
is
elements. I was right.
Make
you're,
it more
you're
like
exploring an
Bloodborne.
area.
Breath of the
You
Wild.
know there's enemies around. The music gets tense. You're tense, and then you kill all the enemies. Okay, well then do you keep that music going, even though there's none left?
What are we?
Here's another reason that I
I'm
think
just
there's not
asking. I
much
don't know.
tension is because this game is so well designed in terms of making sure you always have what you need, that there's never any tension that you might not have something that you need. You can't even the stuff that's missable, like, oh, I didn't get that safe, I didn't get that like cool weapon or that holster. No, the game's gonna make sure you get it. Don't worry about it. That's another thing. I mean, there's not even really any exploration tension. There's
There
not
is one. So, By the Goddess brings up a good point,
resource
and
tension.
There is one moment in the game that is a standout as far as like creating that horror atmosphere, and that's when you go into the bottom
The
of the hospital, the
hospital.
ground
And it
zero
becomes
section.
Resident Evil.
And it does become
Yes.
Resident Evil, and that's the one moment where I don't think they do that. Like they don't.
Correct. You're never
'Cause you're
not
never
in
really safe.
tension in that whole segment.
It-
And
and
I
I
remember
think
the
that's
whole time
why-
I was playing it.
It's an environment that
tense.
feels like it doesn't exist just to feed you resources. You actually like go through a place, unlock some doors, go back through. Things are different. Like it's not just a bunch of pretty scenery with scissors and duct tape.
and I think about if they had taken like if they had applied maybe the same design philosophy from that segment to like one of my favorite moments in this game is when you go to the convention center. Funny enough, I remember standing on top outside the convention center and being like, wow, this looks like that area outside of PAX where everyone goes to smoke. And then I looked over and you see the Seattle Convention Center. I was like, oh shit.
Yep.
But you go into the convention center and you go into this one room and then you run. I forgot what they're called, but the enemies that they kind of peek out from behind corners. Stalkers, yeah, which reminded me of Dead Space 2. Dead Space
Yes.
2. And I remember that moment being one of
That's
my
great.
favorite moments because I get that part is intense and creepy.
Yeah.
But they do the same thing where they're like, I think that's the lot.
But do you know why? I think it's because that's the one enemy you encounter where it doesn't. I was like, why is this upside down? The one enemy you encounter where the feel of combat is very like, are they all gone?
They don't follow a pattern.
Yeah, they don't follow.
They're very
pattern.
sporadic. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it adds.
And you can't
a
hear
lot
them
of
very
tension.
well, so you can't
Yeah.
use your like special vision to like see them.
Yeah,
very
it
clearly
feels
through
like a
walls
little
and
bit of
stuff.
a different game. I mean, give me more stuff like that. But
You're right. I
let
think
me
the
let me
moments
ask you
where they-
like
where
a
they-
big
they-
question here. Maybe I took
Okay.
us off track. When you do a spoiler cast like we're doing, should we even be talking about gameplay design, or is this a bad idea?
I mean,
I
we
think
get
there are
back onto
certain
the story?
times when we're trying to avoid spoilers that we do avoid some gameplay topics because it
that's
could
true.
be spoilery.
Because
But I mean, we
pieces
can
are things you don't want to spoil either.
People
And
wanna-
yeah.
want-
we can start kind of moving
Let's
more.
chat.
If there's
Should we
like
get back on the story?
story beats you want to talk about.
What'd y'all think of the Rat King?
I'm just
I thought it
venting.
was
You gotta understand that. Like, y'all
that
talked
was a
little bit
great
from
sequence. I love
Fuck
that.
I was fucking
The
scared.
Rat King, the Resident Evil
Yeah.
boss.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was
that's
really
it.
yeah, that's
into
great.
the
That's
idea
great.
of
We need
it.
more
and
of that.
I just fucking I had to play it too many times. So I
Yeah,
you died.
It was
Yeah,
it was
I
a
died a
very
couple
different kind
times.
of encounter.
yeah, but
for
it
sure.
felt like
Yeah.
a Resident Evil boss.
yeah,
it
but
did.
I'm not playing Resident Evil.
I know, but Resident Evil's good and it gave me good feelings.
Okay. The Last of Us 2 is good.
No, it is. It's good.
and it
mean,
gives us good feelings.
the
So why don't we
gameplay
take a
is
break
Great,
and we'll come back. We'll come back after the break and we'll have the second half or whatever of this conversation we're having. Whatever track we're on, I don't even know. We still got plenty of ground to cover. So let's take a short break. We'll come back and we'll continue talking about The Last of Us Part 2.
Let me rephrase. Oh, yeah, we're done.
Rephrase, Brad.
Let,
Go ahead.
let me rephrase.
Am I supposed to pause my?
It was a really good boss, and it felt like a game that had good bosses in that moment.
Okay.
Perfect. Fade to silence. Welcome back to our Spoilercast for The Last of Us Part 2. I want to start this section off because we were getting kind of crazy there at the end of the first segment. Let's kind of get it back on track. Let's focus a little bit. Yes, I know. I couldn't believe it either. Just to kind of get the conversation going, I want to have a conversation about how this game approaches death, unexpected death, because it happens a couple times in this game. And there's some of my favorite moments, just like little like moments that happen in this game, because it happens to characters that I was really becoming attached to. And I know, Brad, you said this is. You said it was kind of riffing off
Julianne Moore style. And from
Julianne. What?
I made
Spoilers.
Children of Men.
Oh, I forgot. Yeah. Children of Men, which I haven't seen in a while, but I remember you were talking about. This game specifically.
If I were to tell someone to whatever, never mind. Keep going.
Yep, moving on.
So I just want to talk about how it handles death. The first time it happens, I think, is Jesse, who is a character that's introduced very early in the game.
Dude, that death fucking shocked the shit out of me.
That death wrecked me because
I was like, what? Like
I
I did
was-
not see it coming, and when it happened, I was like, no, right?
Jesse's the most likable character in that
Yeah,
game.
I fucking love Jesse.
Jesse is an amazing character. I was at the point where I was like, dude, if they kill everybody in this game and Jesse gets his own game next, I'd be fine with it because I like this guy. He's a
He's
likable
too
character.
for this universe.
Come on.
He's
And
too
then he gets-
likable for this universe.
And then he literally runs out of a door and Abby shoots him in the face and he's gone. And I saw a lot of people upset about that.
What you were upset about it? What are you talking?
No. I mean, like
We're all
they were
upset,
upset in the sense, like,
Contextualizing their anger outside of the game.
they were upset about it in the sense that like they didn't like that the game did that. Like they didn't like the game because
we
it
gotta
did
stop
that.
talking about.
They didn't like that he
outside of
wasn't
this
holding the
conversation.
door back from like zombies. Like they just
don't
didn't like
know.
how he died.
In
don't know.
general, I don't think we should address like conversations that are happening not here.
Sure, I'm sorry, but it's something that I've been thinking about ever since it happened. Because it's
I mean, it's okay to see. Like, I love that style of, same thing happened with Manny, right?
Yeah, no, and I agree. I think it's one of those things where if you once again think about it in like the whole like Sonder, if you've heard of that term, but like how many other people in this universe that's their death too. It's just instant. It's gone. They're done. It's over. There wasn't like a big hurrah. There wasn't explosions.
There's no
There wasn't,
time
like,
to
a
mourn.
deal
It's
that-
just what you got.
Ellie
Did you
It
feel
just
like
happens.
Did you feel like Manny, at least as a character, maybe deserved it a little more?
Well,
He did cut in line to get those burritos.
That
He was
son of a
kind of
bitch.
an
And then he
ass.
was just like, whatever. And
that.
and
that
I guess
was
he
it.
did
That was
spit
fine.
on Joel's corpse too.
He did. He did.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely.
like,
it was still
they were
shocking.
caught
when it
up in.
happened.
I mean, look, I would spit on Joel's corpse if I was in that moment, right?
God damn it!
I would cut his ear off and put it on a necklace.
This is getting weird, guys.
The
It's
vibe.
getting weird.
Abby would.
God, I had a thought about the whole Jesse death, and y'all just completely destroyed
Sorry.
me. Now I don't remember what I was going to say about it. I just oh no. What I was gonna
What's
say-
great about those deaths is that both with the situation that Ellie was in with Jesse and that Abby was in with Manny is like there's zero time to process and react because the rest of that scene has to play out, and none of it involves reflecting on what just happened.
But it's
And-
also a
Which
really
again, Julianne Moore.
it's a really important moment, I think, in this game in the context of like the story they're trying to tell and the themes they're trying to, relate to the player is you have this moment where you think Ellie is kind of like, all right, Dina's pregnant. I haven't found Abby. Tommy is telling me it's in the best interest of everybody to just turn around and go home. So I'm just gonna drop this quest, and I'm just gonna go and do what's right. And but she's already done so much horrible shit, and the speed in which they run through a door and Jesse is just dead instantly.
Yep.
It's just like you can't turn back now. You've done too much. There's no getting out of this. You have like the repercussions for your actions are already coming. And I thought that was just a really nice way of reminding me, like, yeah, no, you can't just kill a bunch of people and then try and pretend like it never happened.
It's just kind of like that moment is such a great one, and because it builds to it again, right? When you switch over to Abby, and like it means so much more, and it's just the most exciting part of the game in terms of like kind of a standoff that's happening, and it's crazy because like earlier when you're playing as Ellie, you kind of have those scenes equivalent to those scenes with characters that Abby cares about, but the context isn't there. You don't really care about those characters, so they don't feel like the same. Except when you're Abby, you don't get the other side of that scene. You just get to see like the aftermath, and that same amount of tension is there, even though you're just kind of meeting the aftermath of it, because now you have the context, and it's like,
which again goes back to why I think
parts,
they ultimately decided to structure the game the way that they did.
Yeah, like Abby going back to the aquarium has as much like
you dread it. You're like at that point
you know what you're gonna find there. The player knows, Abby doesn't.
Yeah, and at that point,
like you know what she's about to walk in on.
Yeah,
and at that point, the game's either succeeded or it hasn't at kind of getting you on board, at least understanding where Abby is coming from. Maybe not like agreeing with her or liking her, but like you should at least see her, I think, as like a human being and understand what she's
Abby's
going
a very
through.
likable character. I don't think any characters in this game outside of Jesse are very likable, really.
Jesse's the MVP.
I don't think Naughty Dog's concerned with making likable characters. I think they're just concerned with making
Let's not forget Dina,
interesting ones, or
Dina's
like
really likable. I really like Abby and Lev. I think both of them are pretty likable.
I didn't like Seth.
I didn't really like either of them until they started interacting with each other, but I guess that's sort of the magic of Naughty Dog.
Wait, you said Seth? No, who was Seth?
Yeah, that guy was a dick.
Lev?
Or is that like just one of the people you killed like a bunch of times in the game?
No, that's the bartender at the very beginning of the game who causes all the shit.
Oh, the bigot.
I
Yeah,
really
the
like
bigot,
Seth. Or sorry, not Seth. I really liked.
Bigot.
Sorry,
Bigot sandwich.
you said Seth, and that stuck in my mind. I really liked Alice.
Yup.
Oh yeah.
Alice
Okay.
was really
Who was a
good.
good guy?
Don't give me shit about saying the dinosaur.
Wait, who was Alice?
Maybe a little
dog.
over sentimental.
Alice
Oh,
was
the dog.
dog.
Yes. God damn it. Sorry.
How could
They
you forget
even made you
Nolan?
feel emotional about a fucking attack dog in this game.
I played
Because
fetch with
when
Alice.
Ellie just kills a dog, but then you come back as Abby and you feel bad. Like, holy shit.
I really want you to.
You know, y'all gave me shit about maybe accusing the dinosaur sequence being a little bit overly sentimental or whatever, right? But
No,
like, yeah, you did.
We killed Nick.
I did, and I will again.
What?
But
I will
like,
again.
but it's because I don't think the game has to be that heavy-handed with that sort of stuff, because the relationship between like Abby and Lev, that stuff's really great, even though obviously it's life and death and they're trying to save
Yara.
Yara.
Mhm.
It's like they still have time for like these lighter moments that make you really care about the characters and really care about that relationship without, it's the same stuff that made you care about Joel and Ellie from the first game,
Okay, so that actually
But, like the same kind of heavy-handed sentimentality that you're accusing this game of being is absolutely in the first game.
I mean, that's the whole
They're,
crux of
like,
how they accomplished what they
I mean,
accomplished.
yeah.
in the
like I
first
don't
game.
I don't know like I don't know what what do you
Or are you referring to Left Behind?
I'm
No,
referring are you saying that the first Last of Us doesn't have like really overwrought emotional scenes between Joel and Ellie?
No, of
It
course.
definitely does.
I'm talking about like it doesn't have like I don't even know what I'm talking about. I mean, I
Yes,
love
it does.
Do you want me to bring this back on track here?
Yes.
I guess the track-
I'm looking at chat, and I'm realizing that we've talked about several supporting characters here quite a bit. We all obviously love Jesse and Alice, but like we haven't even really mentioned characters like Owen, who plays a huge part in this game.
Yeah. I mean,
I was
Owen.
not a fan of Owen personally.
You were not.
I
a fan
understand
of
his
Owen.
character. I kind of liked him early on, but then later on, I don't know. And
I
maybe
went
it was
the other way. I
'cause,
didn't like
really?
him when I
Maybe
first met him, and then like as his whole thing started like unraveling, I was like, man,
maybe
get
I'm
this
just
guy. Like,
maybe I did. I don't know. I think maybe I did not like him early on, but then I started to like him. I think he was kind of trying to be that guiding force for Abby, kind of trying to be like, hey, let's leave the past behind us and move forward.
He
but
was
she
the voice
couldn't,
of reason,
which
in
is
her
kind
life.
of which is what ruined their relationship.
He was
in the end.
in a lot of ways the same way he was like Dina is to Ellie in terms like he plays the same role that that Dina plays after they go back to the farm late in the game, and Dina's like trying to be like, look, you have got to stop, and
Yeah.
she obviously ignores it. And Owen is very much the same way, just like
That's true.
stop what you're doing. We could have a life away from Seattle, away from all this stuff with
away
But
from
Joel
my
and-
pregnant girlfriend.
Yeah,
To be fair, he
Yeah.
did cheat on his pregnant girlfriend with Abby.
yeah.
He did.
Yeah.
It's like
Kind of making him a dick.
Yeah,
On
But it also makes him.
Relatable
I mean, I'm not defending cheaters here, but I'm saying like people do that and they're dicks for it, and he's a dick for it. But like,
Yeah.
it just lends to him. He feels like honestly, he's like one of the like realist feel. I don't know.
Yeah, no,
Better
no,
word.
he's a character you could fucking relate to because it feels like more human for like our world. Honestly, I
He's
have a
less
hard
over the top than anyone else.
I have
Yeah.
a hard time relating to like Ellie and Abby in this game. Their cycle of violence is not anything like I've experienced, and I often like have myself. I'm asking like, well, what would I do in this situation? I'm like, I don't know. I've never even been close to this sort of situation. So at the point in time where I'm repeatedly hitting square and feeling whatever Naughty Dog wants me to feel as I'm,
I think that's an
brutally
important
torturing
disconnect.
Nora,
It's an important disconnect because
I don't know how I'm supposed to feel.
Naughty Dog is asking asking a lot of the player because 99.9% of people out there, maybe that's I don't know, but like don't have a point of reference for this. Like most people don't know what it's like to
Neil
watch
Druckmann
someone that
does.
you love brutally murdered right in front of them, and nobody knows what they would do. And that's people like to talk about what they think they would do in that situation. And this game kind of asks you to kind of get on board. And I don't think it's an unrealistic depiction of what someone might do in reaction to this kind of thing. But Owen is like one of the first characters where like everything that is presented, everything that he goes through in this game is something that a lot of people can relate to or at least understand because it's not so far outside of our frame of reference for
It
the
seems
world.
like a fallible human in a way that we make mistakes, not in a way that Ellie makes mistakes.
Yeah. Most people aren't going to go on
Oops, a bunch of
murderous
murder.
rampages.
Yeah.
I mean, but at the same time, I still think those are valid responses. Those are valid, believable responses. It's just not a lot of people can.
Even if
get
they're
on that
not
page.
valid, reasonable, like psychological responses, they are valid, dramatic
Human responses. Yeah,
Dramatic.
that's what I mean. Like you could
They
see
make for an
it
interesting
happen.
story.
Yeah, and you could see how that could happen. I'm not saying it's justifiable or not deplorable, but you can at least understand
Were y'all
how someone could get to that point.
Were y'all hitting square when you had to hit square in the Nora scene? I mean, were y'all just
you had to.
I tried to no. I was hoping. I mean, because at that point she was already dead. She was gonna because she was gonna.
Trying to put her out of her misery. I
Well,
think,
I mean,
Brad,
no.
I think, and
I was trying to
I
resist
got
the
you,
urge.
Nick.
I stopped. I took my
I
hand
got
off the
you.
controller to see what would happen, and
But you have to. And there was multiple times where I was kind of stopping and maybe not moving forward, especially with like the very last fight in this game, because I didn't want Ellie to do it, but it didn't matter what I want, because it's like you said earlier, Nick, Ellie is not me. I am playing as Ellie, and that is what Ellie wanted to do. So it doesn't
Ellie's going to
matter
do
how
what
much
Ellie's going to do.
I
I feel
don't
like-
want to press square to kill Nora. Ellie wants to,
You're not,
and it's gonna happen.
So that's the weird thing, though, right? So why did they give you the prompt? They want you to maybe somehow feel what Ellie's feeling in
I
that
think maybe they do. They were trying to kind of like, I don't know. I think that was
Noah Caldwell Gervais talks about that moment specifically, and he says that it's a culmination of like the design decision to or the thematic decision to reinforce the fact that like Ellie didn't make a choice to go on this murderous rampage. She made a series of choices that added up to a murderous rampage. Every time she goes to swing her weapon, she's making a choice that she could walk away from, but she doesn't walk away from. So we as the player don't walk away from because we are play acting as Ellie.
Yeah,
You know what
and
I'm
that was
saying?
like that was
So-
that was
so
like
it's
the
like-
crux of his.
You don't have a choice to not do it because you're playing Ellie, but you have to do it to be complicit in the choice that she makes. So like, I mean, you press that button like 3 or 4 times in that sequence, and it's like every one of those was a moment where the game is telling you Ellie could walk away, but she won't. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
And I think that's pretty valid.
You know what?
it gets
You're
a
right.
little awkward when it's a one-on-one fight between Abby and Ellie, and you don't know
Who you're rooting for?
or what's gonna fucking happen.
Well, no, so
I
I let myself die because I didn't want it to happen, and then, of course the game forces it to happen. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like it made me, when I was playing it, I was obviously, anybody who's played Metal Gear Solid 4 is going to think about that final scene. But in the final scene of Metal Gear Solid 4, you want to defeat Ocelot. Like you're like, fuck this guy, I'm going to kill him. But in this, it's like I stopped and I died because I didn't want either of them to die.
It was such
I
a
remember
weird
hearing-
like,
I wanted
the game-
Ellie to be able to just walk away.
It's
did-
storytelling through interface. It's something that only video games can do. It reminds me of like Nier Automata shit or like
But were
Nier
they-
shit from like the end
was
of those
the game
games.
trying to get the player was trying to evoke in the player some feeling of I don't know what I want to do here.
I feel like to an
I
extent,
mean,
it
at
was,
least make
but-
you think about it. I mean, it's definitely like every time the game pops up that little prompt, it's like it's a reflexive response for you to make a decision. So you are naturally going to consider what's happening, you know?
And-
even if it's not a real decision, it is a pause. It is like it's a period in the end of a sentence. It's like the way a novel like breaks one paragraph off from another paragraph. It's a moment for you to stop and think about what is actually happening in the
What am I
moment.
supposed to think when Ellie shoots me in the face 8 times in a row? And I
So
see a hole
so
in Abby's
here's
I
the
don't-
thing.
8
I don't
times
know,
in a
man.
row.
Here's the thing about that
I don't
sequence,
know,
because I know
I'm talking about the other thing, but
I understand your frustration with that sequence, because I died a lot too, and I was getting
Which
frustrated.
sequence?
Where you're fighting Abby as Ellie in the theater when you finally have that
Yeah.
confrontation.
As Ellie? Or
Yeah, at the
fighting
end- at
Ellie as Abby?
Sorry, no.
Yeah.
You're fighting Abby playing as Ellie at the end of Ellie's
Other
day
way
3 in
around.
Seattle. When Abby
No, you're playing as Abby and you're fighting Ellie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think you
Oh.
ever. Yeah. You definitely
Oh
play
my
as
god,
Abby.
you're right.
By
You're
the way,
right.
people describe that
Completely blanked.
fight way differently than how it played out for me, which I was pretty much engaged in hand-to-hand stuff like immediately and never had much time to like sneak around or anything or use.
I think I was pretty aggressive in that too, but I did like it, and maybe I think the game should have made you be a little more stealthy, like maybe made Ellie run away a little more, because I think they tried to have it be as if the player was playing as Ellie and what she would do. Like at one point, Ellie ran off, and I went to chase after her, and I saw like an explosive trap on the ground. And I
Dude,
was
that
like,
part,
oh,
that's
shit,
crazy.
you laid a trap.
And
Like
not
that's
only does she
cool.
lay traps, you can see her stop and like prepare, like craft the traps like you would do.
Mm.
Did you ever do that? Like if you like, I crashed down and like turned on my like Batman
Uh-huh.
vision or whatever, and I saw Ellie run behind a thing and get down on her knees and open her backpack and like start crafting stuff, and then she laid a trap.
Yeah.
That's just crazy.
Gameplay
But what I
wise,
was
it's
gonna
a great test of everything you've learned up to that point.
It's
well, it's also a great moment to like to reflect on like the other side of what you have been doing as Ellie,
Right.
you know?
And honestly, like I got frustrated too, Brad, because I died a lot during that sequence, and I was like, this is kind of killing like the moment for me. But at the same time, I keep thinking to myself, like Crispy said,
Sure,
this
because
is something that is unique to video games, and if they hadn't at least attempted to do something like this, I feel like it would have been wasted potential.
but that fight is so high. It's such a weird thing, right? Because that fight is like
You don't want either one of them.
it's so high. I mean, it is the culmination. It's the confrontation, right? So to see Ellie shoot Abby in the face and now Abby's dead, that's like another story that goes off and doesn't exist. But you don't think about that kind of moment in any other time.
But it's a fail state. I mean, you have to have them because you're
so
gonna fail.
I feel like Naughty Dog is experimenting with a lot of things like this. When do they want to give the player control, or what kind of control? Who do they want the player to control? And I'm just struggling to understand. I feel like there's honestly not a complete thought there.
I mean,
Okay.
you get to have that confrontation essentially twice. One where you play as Abby and one where you play as Ellie.
The other time is in the water.
The very end, in Santa Barbara at the end of the water, where you get to have that.
If you're watching
it's
the
not
footage, you'll
same.
see it soon.
It's not the same because you're not engaging in that fight the same way. You're not sneaking around and stuff.
Is in like the context for those fights are so different though, right? Like the reason it seemed weird that I'm playing as Abby and I want to beat Ellie, but I don't want to beat Ellie, but I'm Abby.
But this is where they drive
But it makes
home.
sense for Abby to want to kill Ellie there, like no question, right? Like this
Right.
is.
I mean, this
there's
is
no question.
Yes and no, because I think that's the same vision. That's the thing she was doing earlier, where she kind of, you know, and don't get me wrong, Lev definitely stops it from happening, but I think she kind of gets to the point. I think she gets to the point where she realizes that, hey, killing Joel didn't make me happy. Why would killing this person make me happy either? Like it's just murdering someone is not going to get you.
What's happened at the most cliche times in this story? I hate it.
But like, that's just,
I mean, so say
Dina, why would she even like question not killing Ellie there?
Wait, what?
I don't know.
She didn't kill Ellie at that exact moment because Lev is standing right there.
Well, she was about to kill Dina, yes, but Lev is the one who stopped that from happening.
Sorry, that's what I meant.
I don't think her being pregnant was relevant at all.
I mean,
think there's room
she has
in
that
this
line where she says Ellie says stop, she's pregnant, and she says good. And then Lev says, I forgot, interjects and says something that makes Abby rethink what she's doing and assess the situation and stop.
See, Abby has no reason to think that Ellie is. I mean, she's proven herself to be this crazy, like revenge-seeking person that is not gonna, you know, change her mind at the last second, like she does at the very end of the game. So why does Abby even?
But I mean,
honestly,
here's the
I think
thing.
talking about plot choices and I don't know.
I mean, here's the thing. I mean, Ellie's story is about her kind of losing her humanity and track of, like, you know, morality in her quest for revenge. And Abby's story is the exact opposite, coming back from that point, because her friends, including Yara, including Lev, they introduce into her a level of caring that she had lost when her father
They're
died.
both at very different points of the same journey, but they're both trying to get to the same place, and they both end up in the same place at different times. Abby has that moment of realization because of Lev at the last possible second, which, yes, it's cliche, but that's kind of what storytelling is. I mean, I'm with you. I'm with you.
It is, and I don't think it is.
I mean, I don't think it is either. It's cliche in the sense that, like, sure, it's been done before, but like, it makes sense. Like, it's not like it doesn't make sense.
It's like an emotional, like, plot point that's like that the whole moment is hinging upon, and you see
that's what storytelling is.
Well, that's not what storytelling is. That's what that type very specific storytelling technique is, and it's so weird that only in those moments are when they decide to, like, second guess themselves. That's why
why is it weird in only those moments?
200 people.
So
And
those
the
200 people,
the one person the one person that they can't kill is the only one that they really needed to kill.
But the whole point is they killed all those
Maybe
people
that's
in a
beautiful or
quest to
something,
survive.
but Jesus.
Abby didn't need to kill Ellie to survive at that moment. She had won. She had won the fight.
But
and she's
Abby didn't go to the theater out of survival.
No, dude. Oh my god.
Yes, she was
We've gotta
seeking
get this back
revenge
on
at
track.
that point, but then when she got there and she had won the fight and could have easily killed Ellie, Lev was like, sorry, at that point it was Dina, who she might have also killed Ellie after killing Dina, but Lev was like, hey, stop. Essentially, this isn't going to get you anywhere, because I think it is that cycle of revenge. So say, and Crispy seems like he's upset, but hold on. Say Abby, okay, sorry, Crispy. Say Abby had killed Dina and was like, yeah, fuck you, Ellie, and then kills Dina and left. Well, then you know what? Ellie's going to come after Abby again, and she's going to kill Abby. And then Lev's going to come after Ellie and kill Ellie. And then Tommy's going to come. It's just cycle of just killing over and over because of revenge, where at any point in time, like Crispy had mentioned earlier, like the swinging of the hammer or whatever against Nora, you can stop it at any point in time, and you kind of have to become the bigger person to stop this cycle of revenge. And at that point, Ellie knew she was defeated. I think Abby maybe saw in Ellie that she was like, hey, come after me again. I'm going to kill you, blah, 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 whatever. And she was like, hey, this is kind of done. And for all intents and purposes, it was, until Tommy started shit up again. But that's what I'm saying. That had kind of stopped that cycle.
These moments, these confrontations between Abby and Ellie are the moments where they drive that idea home about it's the whole game is about trying to break the cycle of violence. And if you don't break it, like Nolan said, it's just going to be an endless thing. And like I said, Abby reached that point because of her newfound relationship with Lev, and she reaches it at that exact moment. However you feel about that, whatever. But like that's the thing that makes her realize this is just going to be, someone's got to stop it, and it's going to be me. And Ellie is at that point. Ellie is also like she's trying to get to that point as well. And for all intents and purposes,
you don't have to explain it to me. I know exactly what the story's doing. I'm just observing that these decisions are always made at the most climactic, dramatic moments possible
for dramatic effects.
And that is what you always see. And it's like, what is the story where,
But I mean, right? So to that point, you could let's split apart this game, and let's say Abby never showed up to kill Ellie at the theater, right? Abby was a day late. Ellie went home. Well, then her story ended. She would have never gone after Abby again. Say Ellie had died against some zombies before Abby killed Joel. Well, then that's the end of Abby's story. You know what I'm saying? Like you say, like, oh, they stop at a big point, but not necessarily.
Really interesting stories. And there are moments where it almost does happen, like not in these climactic dramatic moments, and I find like those scenes, like,
can you give an example?
Interesting, like earlier theater scenes, I think, between like Abby and Dina, or even like
Abby and Dina, Ellie and Dina,
where like Tommy is like trying to maybe convince, or like when you're at a point where you're like, okay, well, maybe we should go back. Dina's pregnant. Tommy isn't really he says something about let's go back. And the story can go somewhere from there. But like, to me, that's more interesting than what's the mind changing that happens at the most climactic moment.
I think they were. Here's the thing. I think they had a very specific idea. At whatever point when they were writing this game, or
I just don't know what I'm trying to say.
What?
Sometimes you accuse me of not actually caring what I'm saying about what I'm saying.
Let's not go down that conversation. What's up, Nick?
Sure.
I'm trying to. At some, Naughty Dog had a very specific idea of where they wanted the game to end. I think the climactic moment in Santa Barbara where Ellie decides to instigate a fight with Abby at the last possible moment, and then and then at the last second let her live. And they wanted to reach that point, and everything that kind of happens along the way, especially from that moment at the theater when you fight Ellie at playing as Abby. Everything that happens from that point is in service of getting them to that point. I don't know what I'm trying to say. I don't really know what you're trying to say. I don't know what any of us are trying to say. Oh my goodness. Somebody get this back on track.
The only reason we're not bringing up that last scene is because I guess it feels like something that should be the last thing we talk about. And I guess maybe
not necessarily. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be.
Well,
hold on, Brad, I'm still confused. I'm just confused in the sense that you're saying that why does it always have to be at a major turning point? Well, I think because that's the reason it stops.
Well,
that is there's a reason they stop. What's up?
But I'm saying the person that should be the easiest fucking person to kill, especially when Abby hasn't really been following this whole story of Ellie. She just sees this as a person who's killing her friends and doesn't even really have all that context. Sure, maybe Abby shouldn't kill Dina because she right? That's crazy, right? And I think that's when Lev was like, "What the fuck are you doing?"
That's why I think that moment was Dina and not Ellie.
Leaving,
if it was Ellie, I think she would have killed her without hesitation.
But this is a story about incredibly capable revenge-seeking people. Why would you ever just walk away from someone like that? That is a horrifying thought.
Because I think it is because growth and breaking the cycle. If you don't do that, then nobody grows. Everybody just does what you expect them to do, and it's boring, right?
I mean, I feel like Abby breaks the cycle, but it doesn't help because Ellie still comes for her again, right?
But no, at that point, Abby broke the cycle. Abby was done with it. Even when Ellie shows up in Santa Barbara at the end, she shows up. She sees that Abby and Lev have been tortured by these slavers living in Santa Barbara. She saves their life, and Abby's first instinct is not to care what's up. Abby makes it very clear: if I ever see you again, I'll kill you. But at that point, she doesn't care. All she cares about is getting Lev to that boat and getting him to safety. At that point, Abby is essentially Joel in the way his relationship was with Ellie at the end of the first game.
Abby and Lev 100% echo Joel and Ellie.
I know, and
their relationship and Lev helping Abby grow to an extent.
And what I'm saying is the moment Abby puts down the knife and tells Ellie if she ever sees her again, she'll kill her, but she leaves her alive and walks away from that. She was done. And Ellie shows up in Santa Barbara. She's still done, but Ellie's not done. Ellie hasn't broken the cycle yet, and Ellie's the one that we're the most invested in because we've been with her for 2 games. So, and we at that point we want her.
Let's talk about the final act or the epilogue. Tommy,
is it safe to call it an epilogue considering some of the most important story moments even happen in it? It still feels part of the game.
Final. Well, okay, so whatever. What about the farm, Brad?
What is driving Ellie there at that point? You think
at the farm or in Santa Barbara?
I'm asking what y'all's take. I don't have some
points. I think to an extent,
Ellie's final decision to go to Santa Barbara.
Tommy.
I mean, no. I don't think it's Tommy.
I think it's a combination. I think Tommy eggs her on enough. Maybe she still had all that shit in the back of her mind, but Dina being there, clearly she still has PTSD. She not in a great place.
Before Tommy shows up.
Dina being, I know but I'm saying she's still not in a great place. But Dina and JJ are what is keeping her in Colorado or Wyoming, wherever they are. That's what's keeping her there. Is these people who care about her. Obviously, JJ doesn't care about anything. He's a baby. But those people are keeping her kind of from seeking out that revenge. But then Tommy comes back and he's like, "What the fuck is wrong with you? She took so much from us, blah, blah, blah." And Ellie's like, "Well, I mean, yeah, she kind of did."
It seemed out of character because at the beginning of that story, Tommy didn't even want Ellie to leave.
That was before Tommy lost everything. Of violence. That's the cycle. Tommy was doing great. Yes, it sucks. His brother died, but you know what? He still had a good town. He had a wife and all this stuff. But as soon as Ellie eggs on Tommy, and Tommy now goes to seek revenge. He loses his leg gets fucked up, his face gets fucked up, he loses his wife, he's now lost everything, and so he actually physically can't even go after Abby, and he's like, you have to like avenge, my brother and your dad and whatever, and you're too chicken to do it. And that's what
question Tommy wanting to kill Abby. It's the trying to convince Ellie to go through it. After what her situation in life, all she's been through, it seemed like strange to me.
I think it's supposed to seem strange. He lost it's not like he lost everything because Joel died. He lost everything because he went down that road, because he gave himself to hatred and revenge. It poisoned everything. He lost everything that Ellie could still have. And now that's all he has left. That's his entire identity. It's his entire driving force. Ellie goes through two different phases. The first time, she's grappling with anger and hatred. The second time, it's guilt. It's survivor's guilt. It's like, I don't even care about this for me anymore, but I feel guilty that I'm alive and he's not.
And let me just say, the moment in the barn with the lamb, and she has that quick like flashback to Joel's face, like on the ground, like bleeding out. I think that's one of my favorite touches of the whole game, because in a single moment, I understood where she was, and I understood like, oh, she's not going to let this go. Like that's it. She's in a fucked up place. But I was listening to
that happens even. Well, actually, I don't remember.
No, it happens.
She has a couple of flashes, but that one is like after all of this is over. That is like, hey, she's like,
when time is moved on with life.
Yeah.
Time has clearly passed, and we think she's living this like pristine life, but it's still there. Sorry, this is real quick. When I was listening to that podcast, and I think this was Haley Gross that said this, and because everybody likes to talk about this game, and it's like, it's a revenge story, it's revenge, cycle of violence, and that's true. But one thing she said stuck with me, and it was like, it is about revenge and trying to break the cycle of violence, but it's also about like hatred, and how the smallest drop of hatred can just poison an entire community and just tear people apart, and like that is sprinkled throughout the entire game. So when you get to that point and Tommy is like a completely different person, it makes total sense. In my eyes, it made total sense, at least. I mean, it was I was like disappointed. I was like, oh, no, Tommy.
I think you're framing a moment of character evolution as character inconsistency, and I don't.
No, I mean, it's not the inconsistency. I mean, look. I mean, I don't think it's inconsistency. I think it's
so weird.
I don't know. It seems like, and I'm not one of these people that are like, why didn't she just stay at the farm or anything?
I mean, as an audience, aren't you supposed to feel that way too, though?
Oh yeah, don't get me wrong. Like, as soon as she started going, I was like, no, stay with Dina and JJ. What are you doing?
Right.
But if she wouldn't have gone, Abby and Lev would have died.
If she didn't go, she wouldn't have had that moment where she literally like has the moment of being able to just like let Abby go. Like,
and this lead, and I know this
she had to make that decision from a position of power, but
I think this was like, some people may have rolled their eyes at this. I don't know, but I thought it was intensely beautiful. She loses 2 fingers in that fight. Mm-hmm. Abby fucking bites him off, and then one of the last shots of this game is her coming back after letting it all go, picking up her guitar that Joel gave her, and trying to play it and being unable to play it. And like, I thought, I mean, I think a lot of people would probably say, "Oh, that's hokey." It's not very obvious.
If the guitar is a totem of her relationship with Joel, it's also become a totem of her guilt. And she always goes back to the guitar when she's thinking about him in her moments of like of this like whole fucking hate-filled revenge thing, right? That is her totem to him. So her being able to like her being physically cut off from it, like in every way, both emotionally and like now physically with the deformation of her body, like yeah, her being able to finally just set the guitar down and leave it is,
and walk away.
like,
And
that's it, man. That's the juice. That's the sauce. That's why we write stories. Like, you know,
that's the juice. That's the sauce. I like it.
Yeah.
Um,
If you notice at the end when she sets her guitar down, it makes me think of the first game. We have the
Yeah,
windowsill
the
with like
menu.
her knife in the windowsill at the end of the first. So it's similar to this game. The start screen changes at the beginning of this game. You see the foggy shore, and at the end of it, you see like after you've beaten it, you see the sunny kind of sunset
So-
on Catalina or whatever. Whereas the first game, when the game starts, you see just the open window with whatever, but after you beat it, you see Ellie's switchblade like
I didn't
stab.
catch this either at first, just because I honestly wasn't familiar with that landmark. The
Mhm.
Catalina is what it's called. But
Well, it was
You're
You're
part
not
of Santa
familiar with the
Barbara.
motherfucking Catalina wine mixer?
you
I
never
am
saw
not.
Step Brothers, the Catalina Wine.
I have
You know,
never seen that.
I think
before.
this guitar moment didn't work for me because anytime I played the guitar
It
with the
sounded bad.
controls, it sounded like shit anyways. Like I was missing 2 fingers. So it's like I didn't even know if her playing bad because she was missing 2 fingers or because I yet again suck at this guitar stuff.
No,
You lost 2 fingers.
Yeah.
You know,
That's-
one of the
And Brad
saddest
looked down and they were gone.
realizations for me in the game was like I went through and set a bunch of accessibility options, and I kind of like the idea of being able to do the slow mo. You know,
I tried it.
they had a slow mo thing where you swipe the pad.
Oh,
I turned
oh,
that
not
on, but the unforeseen consequence of that was you couldn't do the actual strumming on guitars anymore. You just had to hit the X
Oh.
button, and I was like,
ah,
Oh.
boo.
Well, when on the Santa Barbara mansion attack, I turned on the when you're aiming
mhm.
slow mo because I was so over the gameplay in this game, and I just
Yeah.
wanted to finish this fucking story,
Yeah.
which describes a lot of sequences in the back half of the game for me, or the back fourth of the game for me. But
I mean, I feel that. I
the accessibility options are truly.
I
a
remember
complete
About 'em, they're
thinking-
pretty good.
I do remember like so
Auto
I took
pickup.
I took a 4-day weekend for this, and I was like I'm gonna beat this game this weekend. And I remember it was because I did Friday and Monday, and I remember it was like 11:30 at night on Monday night, and I was like this is my last chance. I was like this game's got to end sometime soon. But like I kept getting to, I was like no, it's still going. And I wasn't done with the gameplay because I was still in love with the way this game plays, but like it fakes you out like 3 or 4 times, and I was starting to get real nervous. I don't know.
The beautiful story. Look, what is the story if Ellie kills Abby at the end there?
I think it's pointless. I honestly, I think it.
I mean, could she have let Lev go? And
I think it's a more tragic story.
What I mean,
Yeah.
maybe it's not, maybe pointless isn't the right word. I think it would have been. You know what
I think
so
it
many
definitely removes what little. I mean, you know, I think the ending is very bittersweet, but I do think there's like a shine of hope to it.
yeah.
And I think
For
her
Ellie?
killing, yeah, for Ellie,
For everyone.
Yeah.
for everything. I think at the very least it has a feeling of like life goes on, and as long as life goes on, there's hope. You know,
I like that.
I think with her killing Abby and that being like the definitive end of Abby's story, I think that it is a much bleaker story.
well, it's a bleak fucking world, and she's already a psycho
is bleak.
murderer.
It is a bleak. It's a world where bleak things happen. I really like the thing that was really bothering me early in the discourse, and this was before I finished the game, was that like these games are all about depression and like making you feel bad and bleak storytelling and stuff like that. And I think that stuff's definitely there, but I do think it all serves another half that we don't talk about as much, is that like these games are ultimately very hopeful. Like
Yeah.
very hopeful. Like there's always this like optimism, there's always this like spirit, there's this
Human
hope.
connections at the center of the
this-
whole thing.
There's this idea that today sucks, but tomorrow might not, you know?
Mhm.
I mean,
And-
I don't have much hope when every community that's ever formed in this world has been completely fucking terrible.
I don't think
Except for
Jackson was
Jackson.
terrible.
Jackson
Jackson
is
was
like
pretty good, man.
like I was like crying
Jackson
just
has its
looking at
own-
Jackson and being like, oh my
Oh,
god, you could actually kind of like do something. Like,
Jackson has a bigot that runs the town bar. It's terrible.
Jackson has people.
He
and
got put
sometimes
in his
wait,
place.
do you
suck,
think that's
but,
like an insignificant part of this story?
I
He
think
gave her
that-
some sandwiches.
What
I don't think that that's an insignificant part of the story, but I do think that like
I mean,
I do
you
think that
play
all
as a
things considered, if you want to talk about this world being bleak, you can't look at Jackson as being like evidence of that bleakness instead of like a sign that like maybe it doesn't all have to be that fucking horrible.
but like maybe that bigot who was that dude's name?
Seth.
Is like it's just like a sign or a seed that like none of this like utopia is gonna last or could last,
Well, it's
right?
not. It's definitely not
I think, like,
utopia.
I think if you look at it that way, what you're seeing is that humanity should just be extinct.
Well, I mean, in
Because
the world
as long
The
as there's
Last of Us-
people, there's gonna be
I mean, Jesse's dead.
there's gonna be conflict, there's gonna be
Yeah.
like people you're like so yeah, I guess as long as they keep making games set in the Last of Us universe where people exist, then then yeah.
So I like
it's
to
a
think
bad
of it.
world. Like
I like to think of it like this. You know, we Abby, Lev, Ellie, none of them are dead. Their story continues. They might not be at the peak happiness of where they might ever be. Maybe they've already passed it. Maybe they won't ever be happy again. But I like to think of it, look at the beginning of Santa Barbara as Abby and Lev. They're kind of having a grand old fucking time. They're making jokes with each other. They're excited to maybe potentially find a lead on fireflies. Like everything's going good. Like how come, Lev's like, how come you always have to correct me or like call it out when I'm wrong? And she's like, because it doesn't happen very often and it's fun. Like Abby's like kind of like messing with him. And I think
seems
that's
normal to a degree, like back to
both
normal,
of them.
maybe.
They are having a great life. And it gets fucked by the Rattlers, but that's what I'm saying is my hope is the hopeful ending is Abby and Lev sail off or putter off on their little boat off into the distance, and hopefully they find that happiness again.
Well, so,
and yes, while Ellie maybe has lost Dina for now, maybe she can get her back over time. Maybe Dina needs time to kind of cope with this, or maybe Ellie never finds Dina again and she moves off on her own and finds someone else. Who knows?
yeah, I mean, I think it's really easy to look at her ending as being a sad one, but like even if the life she had was completely ruined, she did get over like a big thing. She did make peace with something that was like kind of her defining trauma. And even if that means that now she has to go somewhere else and start a completely new life, she gets to go start a completely new life. You know what I mean?
I mean, her immunity is not actually like a big topic of conversation in this game, but I feel like that's an important
comes up once or twice.
I feel like it's an important part of her character, or like it would be, right? The whole.
I mean, I think a lot of people expected that's what the sequel would deal with.
I think if the story was about the global stakes of ending the pandemic, then yeah, that would be important. But it's just not.
No, it's about her as a person, right? And she feels like like anytime an infected or someone turns or an infected person kills someone, she sees that decision that Joel made. She sees it as maybe she could have saved that person, right? And I think that could be an important part of her character. I don't think that's the story this game is telling.
I think that definitely is mixed in there. I think they definitely deal with that around the time where she's dealing with finding out the truth about what happened in Salt Lake City.
That's when she runs off.
I think that on the character level, it is about Joel subverting her agency by making that decision for her.
Yeah.
But I do think that she still actually does carry like some guilt for being like, I could have been the one that ended all of this and I didn't. So here we go. But I mean that is an interesting thing to explore. That's like, I don't know. If they do a third one, what if it is like, oh, Ellie finds a doctor that maybe could cure.
But that's the thing. I thought the final act is I heard a lot about this game, like non-spoiler talk. I thought the final act was going to be Ellie going to Santa Barbara to maybe find the fucking fireflies and not to continue this revenge plot.
That's a question I have, and I don't know if anybody has definitively answered. Are the fireflies still around, or was that a ploy?
Well, okay, wait, real quick. I've been trying to get this in for like 20 minutes.
No, I mean,
but when we were talking about the menu, how the menu changed with the boat in Catalina Island, they mentioned that, and that's that menu.
Is that the building?
That is specifically to indicate that Abby and Lev made it to the fireflies. I think it's supposed to. Okay. I don't think it definitively says they found fireflies there.
I mean, I think
well, they did. They talked to somebody.
They
talked to
did,
somebody on the
yeah.
radio.
But what Nolan is saying is that could have been
That could have been a
trap.
rattler.
And
But-
that could have been a
Seemed like a
rattler
trap.
trying
But
to
no,
get.
I
timing
think
was
the thematic elements of it are pretty clear that they got there.
And it's a
Okay.
much brighter, like more hopeful menu screen at the end, which is just another.
Well, that's certainly hopeful, I guess.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
I would maybe try to track down Ellie, and maybe there wasn't only one researcher or scientist or doctor
Well,
in the
I think
world that
the
could try to-
implication is that they are only aware of that one.
I mean,
And
no, guys,
I don't
now I'm
know. I
thinking
don't know
about-
how in a post-apocalyptic world you go about searching the entire planet for someone who's good at conjuring up vaccines from someone's brain. That's not
Especially when it's been
exactly a
25
common
years.
talent.
especially when it's been 25 years since the world was normal.
Yeah.
But like, I think if we do end up with a third game, I feel like they, especially given where this game ends, if they're going to somehow continue the story of Abby and Ellie or whatever, and I don't know what they would do, even if it's like Abby now helping the Fireflies find Ellie because she knows this immune person exists. I don't know, but like, I feel like
I would think
the
that would be
story
something Ellie would
this,
want to do.
I feel like the story of this third game, if it ever happened, would kind of have to be bigger in scope. So no, but what I'm saying is, like, at the end of the day, because we opened this podcast by asking the question of, like, they could have gone any number of directions with this sequel, and they went with this one. And I'm personally thankful they went with this one because it is so personal. And
Personal to
like,
you, or
no,
what do
I
you
mean it's a personal level. It's all about interpersonal.
Well, I think
drama.
no matter what story they would have made, it would have been about interpersonal.
Right.
Well,
I mean,
at a certain point, there is a decision you have to make whether or not your story is being driven by characters and their interactions, or if it's being driven by external events that the characters are reacting to.
But not.
I think that's what
games
I think
are-
that's what Nick's talking about. I don't care if you're talking about a video game, if you're talking about a movie. I don't care if you're talking about anything. Like, there is a give and take between those two sides. And
right.
I think what Nick is saying is that they erred on the side of, we want this to be about these people. Like, we want this to be
course.
about their characters and their interaction.
Of
And
course,
we'd like
and
to
it's
see
the
them
right
making
choice,
more
and
and
Naughty
And less
Dog-
about the larger
Of course,
context
I can see them
of the
going
world.
that's what Naughty Dog's
bigger
good
and
at. That's
larger
why
with the
they
next
make good
game,
games. That's
so.
why this game
No, I
is
know.
good. And
I
I
know.
think any Last of Us game they would have made would have nailed that.
You're right. I'm just saying. At
That's
the
why
end of
this
the
didn't
day,
even need to be about Ellie and Joel, and they would have still nailed it.
You're right. And honestly, if they make a third one, I kind of hope they do what you said and explore other characters and stories they could
The
tell.
rest
in
of
the
us.
I
universe.
mean, honestly, I
The
think,
rest of
at
us.
this point they're in, right. There's going to be another one, and they've proven with the second one that they care about everything that happened in the previous game. And I don't think they're just going to randomly make something completely unrelated. Now, I think there's definitely going to be a sequel. It's definitely going to follow, like Lev, and his exploits are fucking maybe Ellie. Let Ellie go.
JJ.
Christ.
Wouldn't it be interesting? I don't know. I'm not a writer, but wouldn't it be interesting if there was a situation where, like, you've had these two characters who were so much about each other for a long time, Abby and Ellie, they don't really share a lot of, like, screen time together. They don't really share many words.
A buddy
Are you-
cop.
are
What
you-
if
you're
they were
pitching
in
the
a
buddy cop?
situation where I'm not saying buddy cop. I'm saying a situation where, like, literally they are forced to interact for extended periods of time.
I'd play that.
What if Ellie
Like
tried
they're,
to track
like
down
they're in a panic room?
Abby or the Fireflies because, hey, I'm still fucking immune, and why give up?
What
It's
if
possible.
she goes after the Fireflies and then runs into Abby? Like,
I thought that was
or
what was
anything.
going to happen at the end of the story, not Radler.
That would have been pretty crazy.
Extended
That was something that is something that I would like to see. I would like
I'd
to
buy
see
that
those
for $1.
two. I would like to see those two characters, like, locked in a room for days and just see, like, what
Yeah.
happens. Like,
They've laid the groundwork for a potentially very interesting sequel.
The
Whether-
best part would be if they met and then, like, Ellie just, like, waved at Abby with her, like, missing fingers. Hey.
I don't know. I don't know where to end this conversation. Other than is there anything else?
well, I think it's a pretty good game, you guys.
I kind of
I
wanted
think
to
all
end
of
by
us are on the
just
same page.
I kind of just
overall.
wanted to ask you guys what each one of y'all's favorite, like, moment was in the game, or like set piece, or just kind of palate cleanse,
Gameplay,
get away from the
story, what
deeper
do you-
conversations here. Just
Just
What
anything.
stood out to
I
you?
liked the toy bow and arrow in the aquarium.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was really cool.
That
was
was
cool.
fun.
Yeah. How many times is there going to be DLC for this game?
No, they've already said
How
there's
many
no plans for
times
DLC.
Oh, okay.
can
Except
Naughty
for
Dog
factions, maybe.
do
Maybe. I
this
mean, I don't
type
know
of
if they're.
sequence?
Wait, say again.
How many times can Naughty Dog do this type of sequence to where I can go, well, this is a little cloying. This is so typical Naughty Dog. To where I can say that and not get shit for it.
I mean, never.
Four.
I think
would say
I think
4
the
times.
issue.
It's
think the
almost becoming their style. It's like
Right.
obvious.
I think the issue that we run into is that mileage may vary widely for everybody, and
Yeah.
and like, saying that it's like unilaterally cliche or too
I'm
much.
becoming very aware that it's
I don't
happening.
agree.
Even though I might like it in the moment, I become so hyper aware that okay, now's the time for Naughty Dog to do the thing that they always do now, and it's
I think they'll avoid that pitfall by experimenting with
itself,
structure and
it's
gameplay. Like
storytelling or whatever,
expand.
but as a person who's
Like-
played a bunch of their games, I would just want them to do something different and fresh.
Would it bother you so much if like the entire game in which that stuff happened was built like that first open set sequence of this game?
Yes, I mean you could still do amazing. Everything that's great about a Naughty Dog game, you can do in a game that's more structurally ambitious. I think like they're obviously for 3 games now have been toying with, but they're
No, but what I'm saying is, would those things that you're describing now bother you as much if what was around it was more ambitious for that team?
which things that are bothering
Like you talk about how like the things that Naughty Dog does with their storytelling that you're becoming more aware of, I guess. That bother you. Would that bother you as much if the other stuff in the game was more ambitious? Like if
they're just different
the structure was
things.
different.
I mean, they're just different things. Maybe I'd be happier with the game overall, but I'm very happy with this game. I mean, I thought it was really great. But
All right.
like they, I don't know. I feel like I'm not a fucking writer, obviously, but at any point in this story, like I'm playing it like I'm some sort of fucking, critic, and
Everyone's a
I'm looking
critic.
at the scene and I'm like, oh, this could be better. Naughty Dog, you could do better. And it's like, that's a dumb way to play this game.
Well, so here's my question, Brad. At the end of the game,
invested in Naughty Dog and these stories and these characters because they made me invested. And when I see something that I think is a little cliche, it's like, no, you were the one who was supposed to like do some cool nuanced thing, and because you do it all the time. But
how often can you do something that is so unique and groundbreaking that it's, oh my god, it's amazing? How often can that happen? Games like The Last of Us don't come out every year, don't come out every 5 years. It is very unique to catch the lightning in the bottle, to create something that subverts
Much
people's
less twice.
expectations. Exactly. And goes beyond all your beliefs without even once accidentally stepping and tripping over a cliche, because that's just how it is. I mean, how many games are out there, or movies or shows, that are completely original and contain no cliches or things that have been done 5, 10, 30 times before?
I mean, I know what you're getting at, and
it's hard to do anything completely original now. That's a very difficult thing.
well, I mean, so like in terms of like gameplay, when they're skirting this idea of like an open world game. I mean, what makes it exciting, even though we've played a bunch of open world games, they're still going to have their very particular Naughty Dog style and their Naughty Dog moments, and that's probably going to be enough if it doesn't feel like something I've played for the last 4 games, which now it's getting to that point. I feel like they're getting to a point like where God of War was, and they need to make their God of War 2018 real bad. And
in regards to Uncharted or The Last of Us?
The Last of Us. I think it's just
because
Naughty Dog in general needs to make their.
That's
The Last
fair.
of Us needs to be reinvented after 2 games.
I feel like
no, not just The Last of Us, Uncharted as well. Literally from Uncharted 2 till this point. Well, Uncharted 1 to this point, they've been making a very similar type of game, and the strengths of every game in both of those series are very similar. They're very Naughty Dog. The stuff that Naughty Dog's really good at. I mean, we could talk about how like, the stakes are so much higher and the drama is so much more significant in Last of Us, but Uncharted has moments of like just a small conversation in a quiet place that feels so significant.
Dude, I
because
think
Naughty
Uncharted
Dog-
4 was full of those moments.
I mean, they all are because
I think all he's trying to say is that like they do this one thing or they do a couple things
Sure.
really 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 well.
so experiment elsewhere.
They need to expand and make
Well,
something that stands out.
considering the
as
fact that they
unique to them.
wrapped up Uncharted, that series is pretty much ended at this point.
Yeah,
I don't think anybody
And
cares
they've
if
gotten
it's
to
another
a
Last
point
of Us
with
or
The
another
Last of Us to
Uncharted.
where they don't need to go further if they don't want to. Like, they're in a position where they can actually do that, Brad.
Their next project just needs whatever it is, whatever IP it
the
is.
last 3 games between Uncharted 4, Lost Legacy, and this shows that someone there, a lot of people there probably want to do something different, more
Hey,
significant.
we're on the cusp of new hardware. New,
Yeah, but
PS5 is coming out
hardware
this year.
wasn't the thing holding them back. I don't think that's
I
more.
mean, you never know, dude. It could the new hardware could allow them to do things they've always wanted to do, but couldn't. You never know. But anyways, you skirted my question. I was trying to cleanse the palate before we wrap up by asking you what your favorite moment was in the game.
Like
Set piece, story moment, whatever it is. I just like what keeps coming back to your mind.
I think the showdown, not the showdown, the moment when Ellie meets Abby in the theater, and how it builds up to that again, knowing that like the structure surrounding that, right?
It's very
How it
interesting.
builds to that moment, and then you build to that moment again, and how like it means so much more, and it's really exciting. That part, and I don't know, like tick on me. I don't know. Like I like this game. I like so many.
No, I know. I'm curious. There's a lot of moments for me, so I'm just curious what y'all's favorite were. And I meant to bring it up, but there was a really great line that's said in that by Abby in that sequence that I think a lot of like I was still like shell shocked by Jesse's death. My jaw was still like hanging open. I almost missed it. But when Ellie first walks into the room after Jesse's been shot, and you see Abby standing there holding the gun over Tommy on the ground, and Abby just looks at her and says, "I let you live, and you wasted it."
Yeah, I mean,
And I thought that was like a really awesome line.
And part of that, like building to that moment, right, is not just the theater, but it's the places along the way, right? That you have these like monolithic places that you see off in the distance that take hours to get to, like the hospital and the aquarium and stuff, right?
The TV
Like
station.
they're like fucking characters in the game almost, right? You spend so much time like getting to them and at them and stuff that the way they seem like such frightening places as you go to them with Abby, because you know so much more, like you see them so differently, and that's like really exciting to me. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Who wants? Anybody?
I would maybe echo the fact that Ellie's present versus Abby's flashbacks, in the sense that like when Ellie goes to the aquarium, it's a dark and scary and like place full of hate, versus when Abby first goes there after
and it's like happy.
Owen it's like happy and bright and just this joyous and like, oh, this must be a zoo for sea creatures. Like they don't even fucking know what an aquarium
like,
is.
These guys are so fucking stupid.
Yeah, like that whole thing. But like I said, conversely, when you go there as Ellie, and it's just this scary, like dark, like bad place.
And
kind of
that
kind of back and forth.
You're right, and we haven't really mentioned. This is a spoiler cast, whatnot. This isn't really relevant, I guess. But the soundtrack in this game, some of the more subtle tracks they use to like elevate tension during those moments where it's building to something, so good. I don't know if y'all have listened to any of those tracks, but there's like one that's like nothing but bass that slowly gets more and more and more intense as it's been, and you can I feel like it was, I don't remember exactly when it was played, but it's like moments like Nolan's describing when you go to the aquarium as Ellie and it's like super dark and everything's wet and like you can't see very far in front of you, but you know something is happening, and the way the sound of the music slowly builds to that moment, so good.
I also like the part where Ellie driving around in the boat in like the flooded city, and you get to the arcade, and you have to fight all the
That was
zombies in the
good.
arcade.
That's what I was going to mention. For some reason, the arcade like little set piece that happens in flooded Seattle keeps popping into my mind. Like nothing especially crazy happens in that moment, but I remember thinking like this world is so full of like awesome little places, and I feel like we've been. It reminded me of that place that we went to at PAX for like a community meetup. I forgot what it's called. That arcade that's right around down the street from the convention center.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I don't remember what it was
We
called.
used to go there like all the time for PAX meetups, and I kept thinking about it while I was in that space.
Oh,
I was too. That was like in the back of my mind. I forgot about
It's
that.
2 stories.
Yeah, it was cool. It was just really cool. Nothing crazy happens there though, except for you fight the big dude. But like, it was just all like,
yeah.
Well, the way you get there too, like the boat sequence was cool because it's a different way to get around, and it's a different way to approach a place, and you almost feel like you're not going to be able to like discover anything, but then you can, and you're like, oh, this is really cool.
There's lots of
it's
stuff.
it's also a moment of relief. Like you've spent like so much of the game just on foot going between places for hours and hours on end.
New verb.
And you finally have
New
an
verb.
alternative way to finally go to some place that you knew would have taken you hours and hours and hours earlier.
You finally get to sit down.
You know what the hardest, like, there's a lot of like hyper violence and stuff, but like, and I'm real squeamish, right? You know what the hardest thing in the game for me to, like the one where I had, my fingers over my ears and I couldn't really look, was the zebra that was caught in the barbed wire. That got me more than anything.
That was really
that sucks. Yeah,
they were obviously going for like, what can be our giraffe moment in this game?
Yeah.
But like, I was like,
What does
they
it
got
say
me.
about me that
They
I
got me.
so didn't care about the giraffe moment in Last of Us 1?
You didn't care about the giraffe
Horrible.
moment?
I care about so many moments
Monster.
in that game, but not that one. Maybe I just
You are soulless.
no, but see, that's
You
the thing.
terrible
I
person.
definitely
giraffe.
that's not how I read it. I just
maybe
That
it's
giraffe
because
moment is
Brad
like Ellie's-
relates too much to giraffes because he's so fucking tall, not like the rest of us short people, and he just can't understand what it's like to see such a tall, majestic creature.
The giraffe.
look.
The
as
giraffe
someone
moment is
who's
like
said a
Ellie's
giraffe
like hope.
more than once. They are. I agree. They are majestic creatures.
I'm glad we could agree on this.
Spoon fed the
majesty.
the sentimentality. I don't know.
Spoon fed the majesty.
You just
Crispy,
don't
what was your
like
favorite
feeling
moment?
Feelings.
I do. It's just not at those moments. That's what I'm
Don't
getting at.
like feelings.
I'm getting
Brad
at.
doesn't like when he's told to feel something. He
You
wants
didn't
to
like
feel
the
it on his
giraffe
own.
sequence? or
Isn't
the
this
museum
sad?
sequence?
Fuck you.
No, fucking kind of. When it's so on the nose, when it's like you were gonna feel in this moment, check this shit out.
Who
It's-
hurt you?
No, but I'm just saying, feelings, they're just not there. They're elsewhere.
Okay.
Am I crazy?
I don't
Yes, you
know,
are.
man.
Yes.
Crispy, don't let this man get to you. What was your favorite moment in The Last of Us Part 2?
So many moments to choose from. I think I'm gonna give it to Lev and Abby crossing the shortcut
bridge?
to get
The
over.
shortcut, yeah.
Yeah, that's like I think that's where Abby as a character really started clicking for me, and that's where like the the sheet had been pulled off the full trick of the game for me, and it was like, okay, you motherfuckers. Yeah, like
Cool. Like,
yeah,
piece.
yeah.
I mean, it just looked amazing.
It
Oh, yeah.
did. It was fucking.
It was daunting being up there. Yeah.
And it was like
I
the
didn't think
moment
I
you realize
even in
Abby's
the game.
motivations with Lev and Yara were more than just talk. She was like,
Oh sure.
I got to
I will go to
Yeah.
great lengths because I'm starting to care about these
Yeah.
kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
like checkpointing that's a little too good can definitely take the tension out of something that should not be tension free.
We've moved on to positive thoughts, Brad. I don't know. I'm sorry. What are you talking about?
Just thoughts.
Chris Davis.
I said
your
it.
Chris
favorite
Davis, what's
part?
your favorite moment of The Last of Us Part 2?
Thank you.
Or no, Chris Davis. What do you think of The Last of Us Part 2? Go.
Yeah,
Someone
'cause
mute
I've
Brad.
talked for about 15 seconds in this entire podcast.
No,
Yeah.
that's what
If that was your choice,
You got to be willing to interject.
I mean, my favorite parts of the game were. I agree that like the museum is a really good moment. I personally enjoyed the most tension filled horror focused moments in the game. So again, the
Ground
hospital
Zero.
against the Rat King, Ground Zero, and also the scene in the woods where you meet Yara and
Oh,
Lev the
yeah.
first
Oh,
time, and you're being
actually,
chased.
Thank you
The
so much
first
for
time you
bringing that
encounter
up.
the Seraphites,
Yeah.
Thank you so much for bringing that up.
dude, that was pretty intense.
One thing I keep forgetting is that the first time we ever saw this game
Was
had
that
nothing to
moment?
do with Ellie. That was
Yeah.
I was surprised by that first trailer we had of The Last of Us Part 2 literally plays out frame for frame in this game. And I was
Dude,
worried that
that part when he's like clipper wings.
Clipper wings, yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, that's intense, but like I remember
That was
watching
our
that
first
trailer-
glimpse of this game.
Yeah, like what a crazy like first
Yeah,
glimpse of the game.
I don't
to
know
show
if that was the
someone.
first trailer, but
No, that was
but
the
that was
reveal.
definitely
That was the
Really?
moment because that was when nobody knew the game existed. It was Gamescom. They were showing this trailer. Nobody knew what it was for.
That was the first
No,
time.
and then
no,
you
no,
see
no,
the
no,
clicker
you're
come.
wrong.
No, what?
No, the reveal was the Ellie trailer where she like
Are you
walks
sure?
in.
Yes.
Yeah. This was the first time we saw it after we knew this was a thing. This was like the actual first look at the game.
Oh, okay. I had those backwards then. Never mind. I thought the
Yeah.
first time we ever knew this was The Last of Us was
It
when you
was
see
a
the
long
clickers come
time.
running out of the
It was
woods.
a long time later.
that was the first time we knew that trailer we were
Well,
watching.
that
was The Last of
trailer
Us.
was
We
The
thought it
Last
was a
Gotcha.
unique
Like,
game.
yeah.
Okay.
We thought it was like a new IP.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
We're
I
like,
almost
well,
wish they had-
this horribly violent game, we'll never play this. And then it was The Last of Us, and we're like, no.
I still think.
Oh, okay, we'll play it.
I still think that Naughty Dog should make a horror game, a Telltale game, and factions.
You want
Well,
the
they should
next
definitely
You're
fact?
only
make
saying
that.
factions to get
Instead of The
the
Last of Us.
favor.
Factions. That is actually a thing, right? They're doing that.
I think they're working on a multiplayer.
They
I'm
fucking better be.
They
I'm
said
pretty
they would.
sure it's funny because if you listen to like podcasts, they try to like slip in questions about factions, and Neil Druckmann's like, "Ha, I see what you're doing," not saying anything.
Son
At
of
the end of the
So-
day, it's a game about family.
Son of a bitch.
You're not you say that jokingly, Chris Davis, but you're not wrong. You're not wrong. It is a game all about family. All right. Does anybody have any closing thoughts on the game? Anything else you want to add? We have talked about it a lot.
I think it's a good game.
All right.
Yeah, GG. 8 out of 10.
Yeah.
We almost made it through this whole podcast without anybody giving a number ranking. Chris Davis.
I already said it.
How dare you?
There were
Yeah.
no rules that said I could not.
You're right. I didn't get that. I didn't state that right out of the gate. Okay. I think that's going to put a wrap on our Last of Us Part 2 discussion. It feels so good to put a bow on this game.
Yeah,
Like-
we can finally bury it.
If this put a bow on it for you, you
Like
don't
Joel.
I mean, yes. For me, dude, I don't think you understand
Yes.
how
I don't truly love it.
I don't think you understand how much I've been thinking about this game since the week. Like, I played it 4 days in a row, finished it, have not stopped thinking about it. I've been thinking about it while playing Ghost of Tsushima. So I don't know. It's just there's just a lot to unpack. Like we just talked about this game 2 hours easy. I think
I think
it's-
like Abby and like Ellie, we all have reached a point where we can
let it go.
move on with our lives.
We
You're
let
right.
it go
Let's
and
never-
talk about Ghost of Tsushima.
Let's never talk about The Last of Us again until the inevitable Last of Us
So
Part
which
3
do you
comes
like
out.
more? And is it better than Days Gone?
Thanks for watching, guys. Good night.
Bye.